Hello everyone, welcome to another stream. So yesterday we went ahead and watched a couple videos by Sinclair Lore and Sinclair Lore and Casetive. And today we are going to watch a couple by MadLuigi, one by JaR and one by the Lore Hunter. So I said I was going to give MadLuigi some feedback based off of some of the spicy comments he got in his comment sections for this video. And this video had been on my list for a while, and I figure if I'm going to react to one of them, why not do both of them, because they're both pretty short. But I do kind of figure that there's going to be a lot to talk about with those two. So after looking at Elden Ring, which ending is best, and the ending of Elden Ring is a mistranslation, explanation and lore implications about Ranni's questline, obviously, we'll move into JaR hEd69's video about the usurping theory in Elden Ring. And as I said yesterday, I really have no idea what this is about. When I hear the usurping theory, I tend to think of the Lord of Hollows ending in Dark Souls 3. So I'm curious to see where he's going to go with this. And it looks like Radigan is in the thumbnail with Marika, so probably something along those lines. And then we'll probably finish with the Lore Hunter, unless we have a little bit of extra time. And his video is "Don't fall for the lie in Elden Ring that brought chaos to the lands between." So do not believe his lies, with a icon of Creary as well. So it seems very thematic and kind of funny, because I did make like the Frenzied Flame ending is the best ending in Elden Ring April Fool's video. So between Luigi and the Lore Hunter here, I'm sure we're gonna buckle in and have a fun time tonight. So once again, welcome into the chat, everyone. Astanex, nice to see you again. Mortis, as always. Howdy, howdy. Is this the Ghost of Tsushima theme? No. So the beginning part of my intro, I just kind of lifted from the little, like violin, cello thing, guitar, whatever they're called, the lute type things that some of the nomadic merchants play in Elden Ring. So many Ember videos. Yeah, Ember's videos are really short and they kind of like play off of each other. So I figure we'll probably get to them soon. They seem kind of fun. So not everything is going to be like super lore heavy, which is kind of nice to have a little bit of variety. So it's also fun to get somebody else's hot takes and then just, froth at the mouth and vehemently disagree with them in the comment section. I feel like I should play that like ProZD video where it's just like, hey, I like that thing. What? I don't like that thing. That thing sucks. Just kind of a feeling going on, talking about like the best and worst features of every Souls game and whatnot. Yeah, I'm ready to throw hands. Hey, Scaleezy, welcome back in. You're watching old autotune memes. What did you miss? Nothing. So we're just about to start right now. All right. So the first video for tonight will be which ending is best in Elden Ring by MadLuigi.
The endings of...
All right. And let me know how the volume is for you guys, as always. Here we go.
Elden Ring are tricky. From Software likes leaving things up to interpretation. That lets each player create their own story out of their own playthrough. That also means that each ending is going to have some sort of justification saying why it's the good one. Though I think if we look at the themes and motivations of the game, and what kind of experience the game is designed to bring about, we can find an ending that matches up with those themes. We can determine which ending is best. So Elden Ring has 6 endings in total, but 4 of those are variants of the same ending, so it only gives achievements for the 3 main endings: the Elden Lord, the Age of the Stars, and the Lord of Frenzied Flame. At this point, I want to note that we need to understand what happens in each ending before we can determine which is best. So if you haven't watched my video explaining all 6 endings, I'd recommend you go do that now.
Damn it, another video to watch that I missed out on. Alright, no. But let's go back to this one. Obviously, with me making the April Fool's video about the Frenzied Flame ending, you might think that that's probably not my favorite, but I kind of do like that one the most just because it's the default of disliking the other ones more.
And those of you that have watched that video can probably guess which ending I'm going to conclude is best in this video. That is, to present my biases from the start, I think the best ending is the Age of the Stars. The ending in which the witch Ranni ushers in the age of the moon, stars, and chilled night sky. And rest assured I have my reasons for this. In looking at the themes, messages, and moral of the story of Elden Ring, I think the Age of the Stars lines up best when compared with the other two endings. And yes, as I said, there are 4 different variants that make up the Elden Lord ending. However, I think their differences aren't as relevant as their overarching similarities when it comes to determining the best ending. The Elden Lord endings vary in how we modify the Elden Ring to create a new order.
So Luigi, welcome to the chat. Very nice to have you. We did have a question for you in chat by AskNext, and it's, why are you mad? Did Bowser forget your name again? My headcanon is that you're just ready to throw a shell at AskNext for asking such a silly question. But yeah, welcome to the stream. So one thing that I do appreciate is you swinging the bat right off the rip and saying which ending is your favorite. I can respect the upfront nature of that claim right there.
In-game, this means they vary based on which mending rune we choose to repair the Elden Ring with. But in all the endings, we are repairing the Elden Ring. In doing so, we are following the guidance of the Two Fingers. Yeah, we maybe commit a cardinal sin by burning the Erd Tree, but even Enya seems pretty okay with that. In following this path, we are going through with the plans and desires of the Greater Will, an outer god and the creator and source of the Elden Beast and the Elden Ring. Sure, we can choose which kind of order we want to install through the Elden Ring, one that changes nothing, one that attempts to perfect the previous order, one that brings back death, or one that creates a world of curse modeled after the Omen. But all of these options are just different flavors of an Elden Ring based order. The mending runes represent the visions of the NPCs they come from, what each one felt that the world needed most. The vanilla Age of Fracture can be seen as the tarnished player character deciding themselves that no change is needed, just a simple restart. But as I discussed in my previous video, this ending, the Age of Fracture, along with all of the other Elden Lord endings, harkens back to the relinking endings of Dark Souls 1 and 3. And in all of
one of the weirder things to me about the Age of Fracture is technically you don't even need all of the other, well, all of the shards of the Elden Ring to kind of recreate the Golden Order, which is kind of weird, depending on how literally you want to take Enia's claim that the fingers want us to return the return the Golden Order. Especially with like the Rune of Death being fractured. I really, 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 really wish that we had more of an explanation as to how the endings differ from each other, but I digress.
Of these examples, we can see that despite their desire to leave things open for the player, FromSoft pretty strongly signifies that these endings are not right or fully satisfying. Stagnation and simply resetting the age are themes categorically condemned in these games. A reset, simple or with an added flair, leads to stagnation and the stifling of growth, an elimination of the chance for progress. And that is what we get with the Elden Lord endings, even with those of the Mending Runes. None of their changes are revolutionary, so the order of the Elden Ring remains in all of their new worlds. Worlds that are subject to the Greater Will, and, in all likelihood, will at some point fail and return to where this game begins, in a broken world in need of saving, in need of change. So if we rule out the Elden Lord ending, we are left with 2 options, the Age of the Stars and the Lord of Frenzied Flame. Let's first see if the ending of Frenzied Flame can fit the bill of a proper FromSoft end. After all, you are very explicitly not following the Greater Will's path or the guidance of the Two Fingers. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending is associated with the Three Fingers and the mysterious entity behind them and the frenzy-based incantations, a possible outer god of Frenzied Flame. But wait, it sounds like we just switched out one otherworldly outer god for another. If the Elden Lord ending was doing the bidding of the Greater Will, is this ending just doing the bidding of the Frenzied Flame? Yeah, that's pretty much correct. If you finish Hayata's questline, she'll be nearby when you trigger the Frenzied Flame ending condition. I'll also take a second to note that Hayata originally wanted to become a normal maiden, but was led down the path of the Three Fingers unknowingly.
So that little bit of info is slightly misleading. As far as I'm aware, Hayata won't follow you to the Frenzied Flame prescription until you actually give her the fingerprint grape. Maybe I'm wrong about that trigger, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I mean, this is a pretty like negligible quibble here, but just, you know, you guys know how I am at this point about being pedantic. Yeah, okay, I'll save my other comments for after he finishes.
Creary grapes were the only thing that gave her vision, which she thought of as her guiding grace.
But when I eat one of those grapes, I can feel a distant light in the back of my eyes. It will lead me to my true duty as a finger maiden.
Eventually, she became fully dependent on them and saw the path of the Three Fingers as the only way to become a maiden. She was brought down this path not as a free agent, but as someone tricked by a greater being. So, after being caressed by the Three Fingers, she has quite a lot to say. She explains that you're now on the path of the Three Fingers' bidding. So, if the Frenzied Flame guides the Three Fingers, now you're on its payroll too. Hayata also gives the explanation of what the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending is all about. Correcting the mistake of the greater will, melting everything back into the perfect unity, the one great, that existed before the greater will divided things into souls and separate living beings. This will supposedly do away with all the anguish, sins, and torments of the world. Things the Three Fingers say were started by the greater will, creating divisions and individuals. Everything will be better, burned into a supernatural singularity of bliss. So once again, we find an ending that is a manifestation of the will of an outer god. And on top of that, it is a rejection of all the most crucial aspects of human, or tarnished, life. The Frenzied Flame sees despair and sin as blemishes to be avoided, to be subsumed in a blissful state of non-existence, where identity of the individual is gone. But these experiences are precisely what make our lives our own. We suffer and struggle and strive to overcome. We live as individuals burdened with these weights, but also as those who can experience the joy of overcoming them. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending breaks from the greater will, but only to run into the more plentiful appendages of the Three Fingers and Frenzied Flame. At the same time, it denies the struggles, trials, and overcoming that demarcate not only our lives, but also the very core of From Software games. These Soulsborne Akiro Ring games that From Software has been making for over a decade are notorious for difficulty in an era of
I can't believe he actually said that out loud. Soulsborne Ring Kiro? Is that what he said? That's just kind of really funny to me. Jan Jarvis, welcome back to the chat. And Jay Dixon, nice to see you again.
Games where most mainstream titles seek not to emphasize struggle as part of their experience. Miyazaki has stated that a vital part of FromSoft's game design is hardship, saying in a New Yorker interview, "In our game specifically, hardship is what gives meaning to the experience. So it's not something we're willing to abandon at the moment."
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that they actually said that like so verbatim in an interview. I kind of want to check that out again. Let me listen to what he said.
Hardship. Saying in a New Yorker interview, "In our game specifically, hardship is what gives meaning to the experience."
Oh, okay.
So it's not something we're willing to abandon at the moment. It's our...
Yeah, that was more about difficulty. I thought for some reason this quote was about like the thematics of the game, which is kind of true. But yeah, I vaguely remember this now.
Our identity. This dedication to hardship is something that is at the core of the Souls experience, and part of what makes these games so good. Philosopher Zach Jurgensen wrote about this concept in his PhD dissertation, saying that games that are too easy or require little attention to rules of skill fail to take full advantage of what sets video games apart from other artistic mediums: the potential for a highly immersive, interactive experience. Easy games negate the value of working within the video game medium. Difficulty, struggle, and to quote Miyazaki again, the joy that comes from overcoming hardship are what makes these games, both in story and in gameplay. Miyazaki admits that Elden Ring is a bit more approachable on these fronts, with the extra Marika checkpoints and Ashen Spirits and whatnot, but it still fully embraces these principles of difficulty. When we try to find which ending is the best fit for Elden Ring, it should be one that embraces these concepts. And it's clear that the Lord of Frenzied Flame, with its running away from despair, does not. And that
I think that's a pretty solid comparison. I was debating whether or not to just kind of like meme on him right now, but no, I think that's a pretty fair assessment in like kind of a meta way. And obviously in my April Fool's video, I opened it by saying, hey, idiots, did you not play like Dark Souls 1, 2, or 3? By the time you get to 3, they're telling you that it's really bad to just keep on perpetuating what's going on, so you need to reset everything, and that's what the Frenzied Flame is all about. Wink, wink. But yeah, I of course, there is a lot of questions that come along with the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending, particularly if you spare Melina and the fact that she's still kind of around to chase you down, and she does promise to deliver destined death to us. It'd be cool if like further content iterated on that a bit more. Like, what if the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending became canon? That'd be ridiculous. Although maybe you could like make the argument that like Vike could do it, perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, moving beyond that, what would a kind of world be after the Frenzied Flame does its thing? Would everything actually get restored to 1? I'm very skeptical about that claim, and as like Luigi was saying here, I think the Frenzied Flame raising everything to the ground and, you know, to the point there is no more ground, kind of goes against that idea of struggling to make the world in the, like, better based off of your will and your dreams and desires, perhaps. But to be fair, a lot of these games don't really make moral value judgments on the player's actions and whether or not like linking or letting things fade is a good thing. So, excuse me, there is this little bit of a contradiction between how Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 treat things with like linking the flame versus the Frenzied Flame. While both kind of make both states of the world return to oblivion, I think the difference between Dark Souls is that it's more or less laying things to rest, whereas the Frenzied Flame is a bit more anti-natalism and anti-life, which is almost a little bit like splitting hairs at this point, because if hEd is right in that deleting everything also deletes all pain and suffering, she might have a point, but as like Luigi was pointing out here, it does also mean that you delete all the good, which is kind of what Melina tries to impress upon the player. So I think that's a pretty good assessment of things here. And then we had some comments in chat that I thought were funny that I want to talk about. Oh, yeah. Scaleezy said that originally the Ronnie ending was the most chosen when the game first came out. And 3 days in, people were already following guides. Kind of a problem, in your opinion. Yeah, that stuff is really hard to kind of fit my head around, because just like the way that gaming is approached now is completely different to how it was when I was a kid. In certain aspects, I guess, I mean, way back in the day, there was still like the Nintendo hotline for people to get answers when they were stuck, and people still did write like walkthroughs and stuff. But just the ease of access of information nowadays is ridiculous. Like when I was a kid on the playground, we heard all of these rumors about like Nintendo games. Oh, my uncle worked at Nintendo. So there's a lot more like direct falsification of some of these claims, and some of them just kind of like lived on. Like one of the most notorious to me was like the idea of the truck in like by SS Anne in Pokemon Red and Blue that allegedly had Mew in it at the time. But I later did find out that the truck was real, but there was no like Mew within it. So anyway, it's kind of a bit to go off tangent. Scaleezy, he did say the dude actually said the full series name. I guess that's how we know he's truly the MadLuigi. And I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Dane, welcome to the stream. You said you don't think we can say that melting everything away is giving into despair. Seeing as you're the Lord of Frenzy, the wielder of Frenzy, it's just a different conception of what is better. I think there is a little bit of truth to that, but you could also make the argument that deleting despair is not facing despair, and in a certain sense, you can make that argument that trying to delete it outright rather than dealing with it comes from a position of weakness than true strength, and one worthy of the will of a true lord, perhaps. But again, all of these endings and people's feelings about them are all personal and can have a different amount of value to each individual. But yeah, so far I like the cut of Luigi's jib.
That leaves one final option, the Age of the Stars. And guess what? It embraces these themes of trial and tribulation with open arms. 2 sets of open arms, in fact. In contrast with the Frenzied End, the Age of Stars has Ronnie acknowledge the individuality of every living being and every living soul. It accepts and actively takes on fear, doubt, and loneliness. It is a path which stretcheth into darkness. This ending does not shy away from pain or darkness or the trials of this world. Ranni basically says that this path will be a difficult one, but she recognizes that a pained life of freedom is more valuable than a blissful life of servitude. This ending is the best at fulfilling and realizing the game direction of Miyazaki and From Software. It defends the joy that comes from overcoming hardship. It is also the best at mirroring the story direction of creating one's own story. Like the ending of Frenzied Flame, The Age of Stars is a rejection of the greater will and the established failed world of the Elden Ring. Unlike it though, The Age of Stars does not simply trade one outer god for another. Some have theorized that the moon or stars stand as another outer god, but I have not seen any real substantiation of this. And every other outer god we know of is not simply some elemental entity like the stars or moon, but they are some.
I would also go so far as to say that trying to say that the dark moon and the stars are an outer god would kind of actively undermine Ranni's quest's significance, because the entire purpose of her order is to make it one that's independent from the influence of the outer gods. So I just don't think that's super compatible with the reading that the dark moon would be an outer god itself. But setting that aside, Disillusioned Dork, welcome back to the stream. What's your good news? And then Scott Leasy said, if the other endings gave you as much content as Ranni's quest, the discussion over the best ending would be very different. Yeah. I am curious if Luigi's going to touch back up on the other endings, but we will see here shortly. Ranni just takes her orders and leaves. How does that leave the lands completely unprotected? Or does that leave the lands completely unprotected? It's arguable. I mean, I think even if the order was away, the outer gods could still have avatars roaming the lands between and or causing problems. But at the very least, if those avatars were roaming around, they couldn't have other people create mending runes to instantiate their principles into the order directly, perhaps, because the Elden Ring is no longer within their grasp. But to be fair, I think it raises the question of, if beings like Estelle can exist in outer space, how do we know that Ranni's path is going to be safe? And the answer is we actually don't, and I think that kind of goes into her dialogue here, in that the path ahead is one of loneliness and fear and doubt and darkness, sort of. But I digress.
Something more specific, whether that be the greater will, the formless mother, or the potentially mistaken rot goddess. This ending is the culmination of Ranni's plan. She was born into a world that gave her a strict role as Empyrean. She was supposed to fall in line and follow the path laid out by the Two Fingers, and by extension, the greater will. But instead, she decided to make her own path, to reject the Two Fingers and the world of stagnation found in the current state of the lands between. The Age of the Stars is the final step in that path. It is a severance of the old ways, and an allowance for the world to make its own new way. In this way, it lines up with FromSoft's design of letting the player make their own story. And Ranni is also not someone who asks for our help at the beginning of the game. She is pursuing her own plan with no intention of our involvement. Only through our meddling and choosing to help her out, for our own in-game benefit at the start to be fair, does she eventually seek our help. The decision is ours, and it is not one which beckons to some great god, but to a dark path guided by the light of the inanimate stars and moon. In choosing Ranni's ending and realizing her path, we are taking the final step in her plan to be free from some great god directing our life and the world. We may be assisting another, but by doing so out of our own independent choice, and because we do so to allow the world the chance at its own story, we are choosing the ending most in line with the game's themes of freedom and hardship. It's also important to note the contrast between us choosing Ranni's ending and Hayata being strung along by the Three Fingers in the Lord of Frenzied Flame ending. In choosing to make our own story, in embracing the joy of struggle and hardship, The Age of the Stars is the ending to Elden Ring that fits with the game's themes, direction, and setting. It is a pristine culmination of the message of the game, forging one's own path through the hardships of the world. And hey, we get an Eternal Maiden out of it, too. In
a doll. But no, on a more serious note, I think in a certain sense you could equivocate what MadLuigi is saying about Ronnie's ending to Dung Eater's ending specifically, because there's certainly a hell of a lot of hardship that goes along with his ending, arguably more so than Ronnie's. So with that kind of logic, why was Dung Eater's ending not arguably better than hers? Is it because you get the doll as opposed to... Well, I guess Dung Eater goes away, but... I was going to say in a New Game Plus cycle, you can turn him into a doll too, but I guess that doesn't really work for a canonical, like, one and done. You can't get his mending rune and turn him into a puppet, which is kind of interesting now that I think about that. So maybe their souls get transformed into their mending runes. Well, I guess he couldn't drink the puppet or drink the draft because he was dead. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I do think it's a little bit unfortunate that MadLuigi doesn't go into more depth about the other endings, unless we have a little bit more. I doubt it. So obviously I do think the Ronnie ending is like the more preferred, more hinted at ending, but it's just really hard to know if that's actually true based on how little we know of the others. Like Gold Masks could be amazing or it could be terribly awful. We don't really know. Fia's could be, very kind and compassionate, and or it could be very, very awful if, like, the dead are forced to live in death and suffer eternally as a byproduct of that. And then Dung Eaters might actually be kind of okay once you get over the whole curse and the reviled blessing, because it does say that after a while the curse will become a curse no more. And I think you could make the argument that Dung Eaters' order is one that's intended to break people away from the Erd Tree, and at least their deaths away from the Erd Tree. So once people are no longer reliant on the Erd Tree, they wouldn't really miss it, perhaps. And so I think in a certain sense, the sun emblazoned on Dung Eater's chest might actually kind of be reminiscent of an age that came before the Erd Tree, perhaps one of the Sun Realm shield and all that. But of course, that's super heavy conjecture. But let's go back.
Judging the endings of Elden Ring, it is clear as the full moon, the Age of the Stars is best. Of course, every player doesn't have to choose the best ending for their favorite. As I said, part of the whole point of the game is making your own story. So
I would also make a little bit of an argument that in the beginning of the video, Luigi said which one is the good one versus which one is the best one. And I feel like for me personally, I like the Frenzied Flame ending best because you get exactly what it says that you're going to get with it. Whereas the Ronnie one is, marginally better than the endings, but I don't know. I just wasn't too big of a fan of any of the endings, which actually is kind of par for the course for a lot of the FromSoft games that I've played, to be honest. But to be fair, for anybody who's curious about my favorite Dark Souls 3 ending, it's the Stomp one. So maybe favoring the Frenzied Flame ending isn't really that out of character for me.
Players can choose the ending that best fits them and or their playthrough's roleplay. There is merit and plenty of value to each of the endings, so don't let this video's view constrain your playing and enjoyment. And of course, this is my interpretation supported by argument. You don't have to agree, but if you want to say that you don't agree, you better have some good reasons. If you do, why don't you share them in the comments?
I don't agree because Luigi is mad, and how can we trust the words of a man? Checkmate, liberals. Or atheists.
Discuss your views on the endings and which one might be best. And if you enjoyed the video, subscribe. It lets me know that I should keep doing more of this kind of content. Well, that's all I have. Thank you for watching.
That was a good video. Like I said, I do wish he went into a little more depth about the other endings, but I totally understand why he didn't, especially because of how little they are differentiated from each other. And also, I do really wonder, if you don't get all of the other great shards into the Elden Ring, do those, bits of order, fall out of it? It's just very strange. I've said this before on my, 1.0 playthrough, but I kind of wish that the Elden Beast was a secret boss, kind of similarly to how the Moon Presence was implemented in Bloodborne, where you couldn't actually fight it until you beat all of the other demigods and awakened their great runes. So yeah, that's just kind of like my thought about that specifically. But maybe it could have made the Age of Fracture a bit better, but maybe it would be a little bittersweet. Because, I mean, you could still use the Ranni one for that. Yeah, because I guess, like, if you didn't get all of the other great shards, and then you had, like, the Elden Beast still kind of exist with Ranni, that would be kind of a cool juxtaposition that, like, oh, she has the order for now, but that thing is still out there. I don't know. That's just kind of irrelevant at this point, I guess. All right, so who said it? Astanek said, one thing that they would have enjoyed about New Game Plus is if the previous cycle changed things a bit. Yeah, I do wish that the FromSoft games definitely had more to go along with New Game Plus. And it does feel that really bad that Dark Souls 2 of all of them has the most robust New Game Plus offerings there. Scaleezy says, Ranni gave no hint what she would do with her order until the ending cutscene. You just got lucky that her ending was nice instead of outright suffering. So she does kind of give a little bit of a hint if you go back to Ranni's Rise and talk to her doll, but that's kind of unintuitive, and I'm pretty sure I missed that on my like first blind playthrough, to be fair. Imagine if you did Frenzied Flame and found more mad enemies, or Living in Death with more rising corpses. Alright, so let's go ahead and paste this link into chat. If you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and give him a like and or a sub. And now we'll move into the next video by MadLuigi about the ending of Elden Ring being a mistranslation. So this is obviously going to be more about the Ranni ending, and then we'll probably have a lot to talk about that. I considered adding like a couple other videos, like I know Zeostorm has one that touches on this, and Shatani's Lair does as well. So I didn't like want to spend the time to just kind of like rehash some of the points over and over, so I did make like a little bit of a spreadsheet with a couple different translators' takes on the ending specifically that we'll look at after this. Yeah, that was a good video.
In case you didn't know, at least one of the endings of Elden Ring, the one I defended in my Which Ending is Best video, The Age of the Stars, has some serious mistranslations which might affect its meaning and lore implications. An article released 2 weeks ago from Frontline JP that claimed the dialogue spoken by Ranni in the ending, along with her final voice lines at her rise, were mistranslations. There were a few videos released reporting on the article, and I've gotten an unending stream of comments just letting me know that actually the ending was mistranslated whenever it comes up in one of my videos. So in this video, I want to talk about the mistranslations and what they mean for the lore and our understanding of the ending. First, I haven't discussed the mistranslations yet because I was working on other videos and because I wanted to verify the potential mistranslations before I mindlessly reported on them. Fortunately, I have two genuine native Japanese speaking friends who were nice enough to take some time to review the article and the mistranslation claims. They have both confirmed that the article is pretty much correct and the English.
So these texts say, so you think the original game English is a mistranslation? Yep, I gotta agree with that. Since Japanese sentences often omit subject, I can tell translators struggled with figuring out the sentences. Another one says, I see, I'd say the article is correct, so the Frontline JP one. And then, there is no one who checked the lines when it's released? Laughing emojis.
English text and voice lines are basically mistranslations. The main thrust of difference between the English and the original Japanese is that the English is both more obscure and contorts a lot of the Japanese meaning. I already explained the English in my previous video, so I'll just summarize the Japanese here. Unlike the English, the Japanese ending dialogue says that the chill night is not beginning, but will be kept far away, and the journey of loneliness on the dark path is a personal one for Ranni, and maybe us as the Tarnished as well, to go on to keep the night far away, not one that everyone will be going on. The dialogue in Ranni's room explains this more. The Order is what Ranni wants to keep far away. She may think that it is impossible to destroy the Order without also destroying lives and souls. This is a thought that could be supported by what I talked about in the Outer Gods video, that the Greater Will was responsible for creating individuals and lives and souls. Its order cannot be destroyed without also destroying its effects, individuals and lives and so forth. So the order may be needed, but Ronnie thinks it would be better if it were far away, where people couldn't touch or clearly see it, maybe so that they would not be directly influenced by it. The English took Ronnie's words about not being able to touch or clearly see it to be a lot stronger than they were in the Japanese, where she is simply suggesting that it might be better that way, and that she is talking about the order, not simply the senses themselves. The article concludes succinctly, summarizing the actual state of things. It says, Ronnie believes that while the order may have to exist, as it is entwined with life and souls, it causes problems for the people. Her solution is thus to take it and leave, keeping it far away where people cannot see, feel, touch, and believe in it, embarking on a journey into fear, doubt, solitude, and darkness to do so. So, there we have the updated ending, and to be fair, it seems pretty clear. Now we might ask, how should we view the ending differently? Well, I have two answers to this. First, I don't think this really changes much thematically from my original interpretation. Sure, there's a change in that Ronnie didn't destroy the Order, but the idea of removing influence from outside forces and letting people live their own individual lives was the central theme I took out of the ending before, and that is basically the takeaway of the Japanese lines as well. I know a good amount of people took the ending in English to be pretty ominous, but this should probably put those fears to rest. This really only strengthens my previous case that the Age of the Stars ending is the best one, giving freedom and individuality to people by taking an actually meaningful action to change the current status quo. Obviously, this is still my previous line of argumentation, so if you haven't seen my Which Ending is Best video, that will explain things in more detail, even though that's working off of mistranslations. But, as I said, it doesn't seem like the mistranslations change the theme very much, at least from what I took from it before. My second answer to how this should impact our view of the ending is basically, I don't care. The version of the game that essentially every English player plays is the one with the mistranslations. Mistranslations that got all the way from dialogue and descriptions to the actual voiced lines of dialogue. I remind you that the English voice lines are the only voice lines recorded for Elden Ring. There are no original voiced Japanese lines. The dialogue is English only. I mean, yeah, it's cool to see what was actually intended by FromSoft, and it does seem to be more straightforward and make easier sense. But also, my experience with the game is with the descriptions I read and the dialogue I hear. The tones and themes still shone through the same, at least they did to me, and that is really the most important part. It's also a part that oftentimes does not really need deep lore speculation to reach. So yeah, I don't care that much about the mistranslations. It's cool to get the original text, but the game in English has become a bit of its own beast, and players will treat it as such. At least until FromSoft decides to fix the mistranslations, which I'd say has about a 0.1% chance of happening. This might be a very unusual case of death of the author. For better or for worse, the English game stands on its own, and I think that's at least neutral since the themes read similarly to me, so really I don't think it's something to sweat that much. Yeah, it might be mistranslated, but the story and its culmination still stand in the same place, in all their lore-based splendor. And Ronnie 2 still remains based. There are of course more questions about the moon, Ronnie's connections, and plenty more lore of the lands between, so if you want to see, hear, and explore more of that, you should subscribe, as I'll be making more excursions into the lore on my channel. I hope you enjoyed watching, and feel free to leave a comment about your thoughts on the mistranslation and what it means to you. Again, thanks for watching, bye.
Alright, I do think that's a good video. I have a bit to say about that, but before going into that, I'm going to go ahead and link it into chat, and I'm also curious as to what MadLuigi's commenter said, because there's been, this topic has been a very controversial one in the lore community, or just, the greater community of the game in general since the game got released, and part of it is because there's two camps of people who treat the ending very differently based off of their interpretation of it. So Luigi's in the camp of more or less reading between the lines and coming to their own conclusion about the ending, which is perfectly fine. That's just kind of how people deal with the game. Whereas other people struggle with a more literal reading of the translated English text and being a bit misled by it as a consequence of that. So regardless of whether or not the ending is technically mistranslated, I would argue that it's probably mislocalized in that it really missed the mark for a large number of players. So much so that on almost any kind of website or YouTube video or like Reddit comment that I've seen related to this, there's always a surprising amount of people in the chat that say, oh, this makes so much more sense to me now. And then there's the other people that say, like, this doesn't really change anything for me. I had the same conclusion. And so I don't really think it helps too much to say I interpreted it properly. You didn't. Not that I'm trying to like say like Luigi did this, but I think that makes it more difficult to talk about the lore in general because it kind of sweeps other people's issues under the rug, even if that isn't necessarily intentional. And so by sweeping this stuff under the rug, I think it becomes easier to brush off other people's difficulties, or maybe not like difficulties, that's kind of wording it poorly, but it just kind of makes a weird environment to have discussions about the game when some people are operating metatextually, whereas some people are taking things a bit more literally and trying to adhere to the text more closely. And so it helps to be aware of these kind of differences in approaching the lore of the games, perhaps. So, like I said, this is a good video. I did link it into chat. All right, let's check out a couple of the comments real quickly, if we can. So, Skip Mickelvain says, they feel that the translation issues change the meaning and the feeling quite a bit. The difference between me and Ronnie going on a 1,000-year journey of fear, darkness, and loneliness, and all of humanity going on such a journey is extremely significant. Feels like they failed humanity in the latter, and a self-sacrifice to save humanity in the former. So this dude has 250 likes out of, like, okay, compared to, like, the video itself has about 2,000. So that's a pretty significant margin there of people that like the comment or kind of agree with it in general. Japanese text makes the best ending seem even better. They would say misinterpretation of a translation. It's not as straightforward. It leaves more room to interpretation. All right, I'm just going past that. The Japanese one just clearly states Ronnie's goal of separating the practical divine intervention that the Order imposed. The Chill Knight is the path of the unknown that would become knowable through the 1,000 years of voyage, kind of like the evolution of years of progress of humanity. The removing of senses of humans to the gods mirrors our reality that humans can't literally see, hear, or touch God, and can only take guidance through self or communal interpretations. So, I mean, I would disagree with that. The last part right there, that's kind of like where you'd kind of maybe have to make that reconciliation with the English version of the text. So, okay, rather than going too much forward, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my spreadsheet here. Oh, yeah. And pull this up. So I do have a couple of different translations of the text here. Up here is the official English. So I don't think Luigi went over them directly. So I'll go over both and then a couple different translations. Although all four of ours seem to be pretty similar for the most part. And it's really kind of only the ending of this that changes. Eamon McAndrews, welcome into the stream. And also Clown Scum, I don't remember if I said hello to you. You said Dung Eater is your favorite ending. The curses in Elden Ring are a very strange and interesting concept, and you have an inkling the Omen curse matters less to him than just being cursed. Though Dung Eater himself is obviously a maniac, there is a lot in the Omen Barons, the Sword of Milos, etc. that paints him as the natural result of a world where sin and curses dominate. The eventual seeming purification of the world is very dark but very interesting. So yeah. Alright. Going back to Ronnie's ending again, this is the text on the left is her dialogue in Ronnie's Rise when you go back there after she defeats her two fingers rather, and you talk to her doll at the side of Grace there. And then the text on the right side of the screen is her ending cutscene dialogue. So she says, actually, maybe I should just play the footage of this. Yeah, let's do that. So that way I don't have to read and like butcher these. Ronnie. So this is from 1.0, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't change anything.
I take it thou hast noticed. I shouldn't be surprised. I thought I might expound a little further upon the order I envision. Mine will be an order not of gold, but the stars and moon of the chill night. I would keep them far from the earth beneath our feet. As it is now, life and souls and order are bound tightly together. But I would have them at a great remove, and have the certainties of sight, emotion, faith, and touch all become impossibilities, which is why I would abandon this soil with mine order. Wouldst thou come to me even now, my one and only lord?
So that's her dialogue in The Rise. The lines in the middle about having life, souls, and order being bound tightly together and Ronnie wanting them at a great remove is, pretty straightforward there. And you can take that to mean that she would take her order with her. But the next line specifically about having the certainties of sight, emotion, faith, and touch all become impossibilities seems a little bit too separated from this concept here when it's very obviously tied in Japanese. So some people have taken this line on its own, or these two lines on its own, because it's like a run-on, to kind of be its own thought when it should have been connected into this. So to reiterate, some people think that Ronnie literally wanted to get rid of things like sight, emotion, faith, and touch. And so if you had a world where there was no sight, there was no emotion, there was no faith, and there was no touching anything, what kind of world would that be? So if you just take this line specifically, it can make Ronnie's envisioned ending sound very ominous, to say the least, and that she's kind of more of a villain, and that isn't exactly contradicted so much by other parts of her quest where she kills Godwin, and essentially kicks off the Shattering, and then she kills her two fingers. So she does seem kind of bloodthirsty and at odds with everything else. So I can see why this would mislead people. So going from that dialogue there, I will give my retranslation, Frontlines, and Chitani's, and then we have another random translation from a user on Reddit, The Deep Dark Abyss, and I don't think I'll just read that one. Maybe I'll just kind of summarize some of these because they're so similar overall. So my retranslation of this dialogue here is, so you've noticed then, I should have figured you would. I've been thinking we should talk a little more about my order. My order isn't gold. It's the order of the stars, the moon, and the chilly night. And I want to keep it away from this land. If life and soul should be together within order, then it would be better if it were far away. It would definitely be better. It would definitely be better if seeing the order, feeling the order, believing the order, and touching it were all impossible. So I will leave this land with my order. Even so, you would accompany me, my one and only lord. And of course, I probably should have prefaced this by saying that this is slightly more literal. I have made some modifications to make it flow a little bit more naturally in the English, but it's definitely not something that I would try to say, oh, they should have used this instead of what they did, because the goal of this is just to kind of preserve the meaning rather than keep a player immersed in a fantasy world or whatnot. And so, like I said before in this, the idea of seeing the order, feeling it, and believing it, and touching it aren't exactly specified so directly in the Japanese, because Japanese is a high context language where you don't really need to make the subject consistent between lines like we do in English. So they just kind of dropped it, and then, in my opinion, they didn't keep the dropped subject relevant in English in their localization, which is why so many people were confused. So this kind of makes sense if you compare it to the Japanese in terms of it being translation or a translation, but this is why I would argue that it's not a good localization because of the confusion this bit right here in particular brings. So let me compare like my lines to front lines. Even if life and souls are one with the order, the order could be kept far away. If it was not possible to clearly see, feel, believe in, or touch the order, that would be better. So they were a little bit more forward with like the order part over here. So that part is just kind of implied in the Japanese, but they just added it. Shitani's lair. Even though life and souls have been one with the order, I would keep them distant. It would be better if the order couldn't be seen, felt, believed, or touched. So yeah, that's a pretty good translation there. It's very straightforward. And I'm pretty sure you guys get the idea there now. So let me pull chat back up. The eventual... Okay, you talked about that. Eamon said, they will say they never really saw Ronnie's as a mistranslation, just as a more confusingly worded one. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I would say it's not exactly a mistranslation, but probably not the best localization that they could have done. Flowery language is different from language to language, and many people don't realize that sometimes. Translators use more poetic language to keep the vibe. Yeah, and that's definitely what they're going with here. Like, Ronnie's dialogue is not, like, very... it's... How do I say this in English? Like, so there's a difference between, like, written language and spoken language, and this is kind of similar to written language with the way that it's used. It's a little bit more archaic, which kind of makes sense because Ronnie is, technically ancient, but it's not like the most out there thing, but just the way she speaks here is very poetic, which makes it kind of nightmare fuel to give a both literally accurate yet semantically accurate translation, because so much is just implied in what she says. Scallies, I guess they were wrong about that? About what, if you don't mind explaining? In Eamon's opinion, Ronnie wanted to remove the Elden Ring, which governs rebirth and souls, from the world. When people can't see God, they won't have one truth to follow. Yeah, and I'll talk about that more a bit here after we go through this and the actual ending. So, the Deep Dark Abyss said, Ronnie desires to keep the Order far away from this land. Even if life and souls are one with the Order, it should be kept far away. Indeed, it is best if one cannot see it, feel it, believe in it, or perceive it, which is why I will abandon this land together with my Order. So, like I said, all four of ours are a lot more in line than what I feel like the official localization got, unfortunately, and it is a little bit more straightforward in the Japanese, even though it is kind of said a bit more poetically. All right. So, let me pull up the ending part. So for the next bit of dialogue, let's pull this up.
The battle is over, I see.
Holy crap, sorry that's loud.
I do solemnly swear to every living being and every living soul. Now cometh the age of the stars. 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon. Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond. Into fear, doubt, and loneliness, as the path stretcheth into darkness. Let us go together. My dear consort eternal.
All right, so that's that with those endings. Well, that ending, really. All right, so I do think there is a bit of a mismatch with how the written text is supposed to flow with compared to how it's spoken. So there is a bit of a time gap between Ronnie saying, "Here beginneth the chill night that encompasses all, reaching the great beyond." And then, because of that gap, it does make the idea of fear, doubt, and loneliness sound a bit more disconnected, in my opinion, from her lines here. Whereas that's definitely not going to be something that's obvious when you're looking at a script in English or Japanese. So I feel like that is part of like where the confusion of this line comes from specifically with the English. But even with that being said, if you take the lines over here, if you even knew about them, or let's say you don't, Ronnie's 1,000-year voyage into fear, doubt, and loneliness, and essentially darkness, doesn't give the warmest impression for a quote-unquote good ending, I would say, perhaps. So, just to compare that version of the English text, here's my retranslation. It's all over then. I swear, to all life, to all souls, from here on it is the age of the stars, an age-long journey under the way of the moon. Everyone should consider the chill night far, far away. Fear, doubt, and loneliness await the dark path ahead. Well, shall we go, my Lord Eternal? Blah, blah, blah. So this translation that I did right here is a little bit more localized, I would say. When she does say the 1,000-year journey, that could be taken literally, but this could also just be a figurative style language. So if you like look up this kanji specifically, yeah, it's literally 1,000 plus year. But when you combine them, it can mean that in the figurative sense, and it could just mean like a long time. So rather than saying that she's going to have a 1,000-year journey under the moon, I just kind of intuited that she meant that it's like the journey of an age. I don't think Ronnie literally thinks that it's going to be 1,000 years. So that's why I would put this here. But that's just kind of arguable. And the reason why I bring this up, this stupid pedantic thing, is because this is probably the only part that I would really differ on from like some of the other ones. Oh yeah, and then there's this. And that's just because I'll just leave that alone for now. Anyway, so Frontline? Yeah, Frontline says in this part over here, I shall swear to all lives and all souls, from here on is the age of stars, the laws of the moon, 1,000-year journey. To all, you may think of the chill night as infinitely far away. And now let us go on our path of fear, doubt, and loneliness into darkness. So it's really, really difficult trying to capture the meaning of like this part here about the fear, hesitation, and solitude, and like the darkly going path. But anyway, Shitani says, I swear to every living being and every soul, here comes the age of the stars, the principle of the moon, 1,000-year journey. Everyone considered the chill night to be far away. My Lord Eternal, let us go into fear, doubt, loneliness, and then tread the path that stretches into darkness. So, there is some like very minor stuff, and for anybody wondering why like My Lord Eternal here is showing up earlier than in the other ones, it's just because sometimes that kind of just happens when you're trying to match Japanese and the way the language is structured to English, that even though the Japanese final line here is like literally like made eternal my lord, my eternal lord, you know, to say that a little bit less literally and more sensibly. Even though this is a fragment, you can make the argument that this fragment is being informed by all this other stuff. So it can make perfect sense to like rearrange this thing here in the greater context of the passage. So, and just to give deep, dark abyss in their context, I swear to every living being and every soul, now begins the era of stars, a 1,000-year journey under the wisdom of the moon. My chill night, all of it, think of it as far away, as we walk the dark path of fear, doubt, and loneliness. So, I think between all 4 of these versions, you guys can get a pretty clear picture of what's going on, whereas this one kind of makes it a little bit less clear that her order is going with her, and we will be following her to just kind of accompany her, because her path is one of fear, doubt, and loneliness, because this is something that has never been done before in the Lands Between. Let me just go ahead and pull this back up. So yeah, Ranni's path technically is one of the fear, doubt, and loneliness, because it's never happened before. She doesn't exactly know what it means to become a god and to take the order away from the Lands Between. When you do get her Ring of Betrothal, yeah, I guess I'm going to pull this back up. Let's go in here. Although that's the Bloodborne name, isn't it? What's it called? Dark Moon Ring? Uh-oh. Betrothal. Dark Moon Ring. Okay. A warning is engraved within. Whoever thou mayest be, take not the ring from this place. The solitude beyond the night is better mine alone. So I think this line here is extremely important to help contextualize just how much the tarnished kind of matters to Ranni, in that she is perfectly willing to do everything on her own, but our kind of pact with her is like a literal marriage with this ring. Like, so when we put it on her finger, we're kind of agreeing that we would accompany her no matter like what that brings. So like we are her lord, you know? So just wanted to bring that up in context. So Scaluzzi said, the Dung Eater ending is the only one that confirms that people will be having sex again. So, you know, maybe it's not that bad after all. You left out not, and it completely changed the meaning. Eamon says, speaking in a colder, more formal written tone, you will say is a common literary device to portray a character as formal or old or ancient. Ranni is one of the oldest characters after all. Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the more difficult balancing acts of translating in general between like English to Japanese, because Japanese is way more nuanced about that. Just in terms of like how much extra stank you can put on a pronoun into referring to somebody else, or like how much like honor you want to put into referring to somebody else as well. But Eamon says, you agree that it didn't land the best, but there is obvious delineation between performing Ranni and real Ranni. Yeah, that's true. We see it when she lets slip she loves Blythe and Iji and tells you to forget that she spoke warmly at all. Yeah. So even with those two lines, it is a little bit unfortunate that Ranni's ending lacks a little bit more of the cohesion in the Japanese text, and that there's two instances which can make her sound more cold and distant, I feel. So, I mean, I thought about making a more dedicated video to this topic, but it's kind of contentious. I don't want to say like it's a mistranslation, because it is sort of technically accurate to a certain degree, some people have still gotten the intended meaning across in English, and I didn't want to deal with the comments of like, oh, well, I interpreted it this way. I mean, that's all well and good, but that doesn't exactly help the people who didn't take things that way, which is why I think it's important to bring stuff like this up, which is what I wanted to say at the end of Luigi's video here, but I just couldn't think of how to articulate it properly up until now. So, yeah. Luigi, this was a good video. I did enjoy it. Forgive me for using this as like a little platform to get on my soapbox about all this stuff. I do really appreciate the kind of discussion that these kind of videos can spawn though. So there are a couple other videos along this vein. I know Shatani's Lair has her own video, so if you guys want to look that up, I welcome it. I did totally steal her text to include it in my spreadsheet for my own nefarious purposes here. But for anybody who doesn't know Shatani's Lair, she does a lot of Sekiro stuff. I almost typed in Sekiro. And I don't think she's done too much Elden Ring stuff, but she is a very fun channel to look into if you're into some more of this like pedantic differences between English and Japanese text between the games. Unfortunately, like I just wasn't ever like super into Sekiro beyond like the action arcade style gameplay. But yeah, go ahead and give her a visit if you want some more translation stuff in your life. So I think I linked this in the chat, but in case I didn't, I'm pretty confident I did. Go ahead and give Luigi a like if you'd like. And if you liked my like a little rambling about my spreadsheets, go ahead and give this video a like, since I'm doing the whole calls to action. All right. So moving on next, we have Elden Ring Usurping Theory by JaR hEd69. And I haven't seen anything by them. I believe this was recommended to me, so I'm curious to see where this goes. Spoilers.
As I'm sure you're well aware at this point,
the huge game-changing twist of fate, wacky storytelling, crazy piece of lore is that Radagon is America.
America is Radagon.
The same god split in two.
And that's confirmed in-game directly several times.
All right, that was really funny. That's one hell of an intro. I'm definitely going to give Jarhead some credit for that.
Undebatable.
I don't think Radagon is America. This goes against the main theory for Elden Ring, the idea that Radagon and Queen Marika are actually one person. To me, it doesn't feel finished, and I'm just not a fan. It's hard to say why. Maybe the message Radagon is Marika is just jarring. Maybe it ruins the mystique and feels unrewarding. It just falls a bit flat. To any of the writers, I'm sorry if the Radagon theory is true, as this all sounds a bit rude, but it feels like a massive red herring, and I can't shake that feeling. Now,
so obviously, I do think this person speaking right here, I'm not sure if that's Jarhead or if he is quoting somebody, is going to receive a lot of flack for that statement, but honestly, I do agree with that to a pretty large extent. It is very difficult trying to fit the Radica theory into the timeline of events, whether or not you want to believe that Radagon was always part of Marika, or like is literally a part of her, or whether or not he was some dude who eventually got fused into her. Like, I tend to operate on the idea that Radagon and Marika were always one, or, you know, like essentially like indistinguishable from each other, because we don't have like a lot of confirmation that Radagon was ever his own distinct being in the sense of like not actually part of her, having his own body, but we do see them kind of fuse and meld together directly in a couple of the cutscenes there. And part of the reason this is important is trying to figure out how much of Radagon is his own man versus how much of Marika was subsumed by Radagon and whatnot. And so if Radagon was his own person to begin with, it becomes a little bit easier to explain that stuff. But if he was always part of Marika, then what caused the split between the two? I have a kind of pet theory that it might be partially the result of the celestial dew that was used when he became wed to Renala, but like I said, we don't have a lot to substantiate that whatsoever, or pretty much anything related to Ratigan and Marika in general. There was one other point that I wanted to make about them. Was it about the two of them, or was it about them being one? Damn, it was a really important one. I'm blanking on it. All right, let me read some comments. Eamon says, Corin himself says, how could such a thing be possible? Okay, I remember. Sorry, not related to your comments at all. So there is a little bit of support for Ratigan potentially being his own man in the... What item is it? I can't remember what the item name is, but there's something that says that Radahn and the other Carian children became demigods once Ratigan married Marika. And so if Ratigan is their father, yet Ratigan is Marika, how are they kind of not demigods by virtue of their dad being Marika? Is there a chance that Ratigan wasn't Marika when he birthed the Carians? And if so, what metaphysical arrangement allows them to become demigods through a marriage contract between their father and stepmother is a big question to ask. But I mean, where was I going with that? I had a second part to it. The Carians became demigods. They weren't demigods originally. Okay, yeah. So if Marika was always Ratigan, does she actually change the physical state of her being, and so that Ratigan isn't really as connected to her as is let on? And if so, that could help explain why Marika tells him that Ratigan has yet to become her, and that he is not a god. So there is like a potential grain of truth to that if they were always like one individual, sort of. It's kind of always a little bit awkward trying to say like Ratigan and Marika were individuals when they aren't because of this. So look at how much of a tangent I went on to 49 seconds into this video. All right. And I saw the chat moving pretty well too. So going back to Eamon, he said, Corin himself says, how could such a thing be possible? Something being unexplained or only part of truth doesn't mean it isn't true. Fair point. I tend to think that Corin and Gold Mask don't have the full picture of what's going on, which is pretty clear. So yeah, I'll just kind of leave that alone for now. Scalise says, you like thinking out contrary or crazy theories as a mental exercise, but this implies Muriel lied to us, which is bad. I would disagree with that. I don't think Muriel lies to us. I think Muriel tells us all that they know, but that Muriel's knowledge is imperfect because Muriel was lied to. Or, well, maybe not lied to, but Muriel was deceived. Whether or not that be like a lie by omission or just like not having the direct knowledge of things. Beans and Rice, welcome back. He said he's the Lord of Night. I mimicked here. That is a fun theory that I've thought about as well. Unfortunately, Eamon, that form of mimicry mentioned with the statue and Marika's mischief does use different terminology in Japanese. So there is a little bit of a break between the two, but I understand why they seem a little bit more connected at first. Astanek said, when Godfrey proved he was too strong-willed and independent, he was banished and a more docile warrior was chosen. I would disagree with that because we do have a couple bits of information that tell us Godfrey's kind of drive went away after he defeated the Stormlord and his last worthy enemy. So it could have been a confluence of things which led to his banishment, and I don't think it's because he was too willful. Does the reveal that Ratigan is Marika actually change anything? Because if not, then why is it in the game? So yes, it is used as a device for us to tell Corin and Goldmask about what's going on, and it does lead us down the path of getting Goldmask's mending rune, obviously. But even if we didn't do that, we would still be able to come to that conclusion towards the end of the game. But it's a really big part of characterizing Radagon in America. It implies a kind of more holism to the two being one than just the ending cutscene alone, perhaps. Yeah, we actually did watch the Cosmos Radagon video. Alright, so going back to this video after like a 10-minute rant for not even a 1-minute segment here.
I know many people do really like the Radica theory, and it does fit the game's narrative, but it leaves unanswered questions. And using the Radica theory can, in a way, halt any ideas that go against it. Ideas that could fill more of these plot gaps. So I'm arranging this different theory for interpreting the lore. Maybe it could open up some discussion before the Shadow of the Erdtree drops. Maybe not, but I love the lore of the FromSoft games, so I wanted to make this video to throw out some ideas. I cannot say enough how my knowledge of the lore is heavily influenced by many Elden Ring content creators. These YouTubers in particular do amazing deep dives into the lore, and in FromSoft games that is very tricky to do. Days of sifting through the games to produce insightful commentary, so a big thanks for their time and content. Quick disclaimer, I've never done this before. I've no doubt missed very relevant details, some of which might be really important. Sorry in advance. Please let me know if I've missed anything, as I genuinely need the help. I don't think Radagon is...
Alright, I can appreciate that kind of disclaimer there, and so with that kind of disclaimer there, I think that also tells me to just like ease up a little bit, because obviously longtime viewers of my channel know how pedantic I can be, if that wasn't obvious by the earlier portion of the stream with me agonizing over single word choices. Anyway, let's go back.
Is Marika, so please bear with me as I lay some groundwork. Real quick, if you know all the timelines for both Radagon and Marika, then please feel free to skip forward to the theory. But first things first, I want to try and explain the current theory before posing an alternative idea. Tons of detail and events will be skipped over to make these timelines more focused. If I've missed...
That's a pretty streamlined looking graphic there. I wonder what they made this in, because I like it. And I've been using Miro boards just to kind of like express this stuff, but maybe if I had like a better program and or better knowledge of a better program, I would use that instead. But anyway, so America, Malekith, Radagon, Godfrey. Oh man, the text is really small. We're against the fire giants. I guess he's probably going to go over this, and maybe I shouldn't like... Yeah, I'll just shut up.
If I've missed anything you think is important to their timeline, again, please let me know. The Lands Between has history spanning thousands of years, with no dates and tons of mystery. Nothing is set in stone. This is just how a lot of people have set up the timeline for Elden Ring, including the Fextra Life wiki, so this is just a general timeline.
Big disclaimer, don't trust Fextra Life ever for lore materials. Only begrudgingly accept them for like images. Maybe things like their video guides for like what certain incantations do or like item locations are on occasion and or item descriptions. And there is a big caveat to that because sometimes they still do have like wrong information on their wiki. So I would just recommend using like the text dumps instead if you want lore info, and don't trust wikis. Don't trust content creators, myself included, and come to your own conclusions based off of like the actual text firsthand. Or if you do watch content creators, take what they say with a grain of salt. Always apply skepticism and doubt to what they say, and try to come to your own conclusions as best you can. And obviously, that's a little bit of a privileged position for me to say that from, just because I have spent the time to look into it, and not everybody will have the time or patience to do that themselves. You only go to Vextruck for quest info? Yeah. That's about maybe some of the only safe stuff on Vextra at times. I mean, that's a little bit of hyperbole, but part of the reason why I stress this is because it's a hell of a lot more difficult to unlearn something that's wrong than learn something new, if that makes sense. Could GM have figured out the Radagon is America? Oh, could Goldmask have figured out Radagon and America mystery on his own? Researching into Radagon would have led him to Muriel, then to the statue, completing his quest without us. I think that questioning at the end isn't necessarily fair, because Goldmask isn't communing with Muriel. He's trying to commune with like the Erd Tree or something directly to get to the answers. And in so doing, he has this preconceived notion that Marika is the god of the Golden Order. But in that process, Radagon's name comes up, which doesn't make sense because we are told from multiple points of view that Radagon was the second Elden Lord. And so if potentially the in-game religion says the Golden Order started with Marika becoming the god, whereas it may have only truly become the Golden Order with Radagon, that could come into a lot of contention with the way that Goldmask visualizes the framework of his religion. So he might not have come to that conclusion. I mean, you could make the argument that he doesn't because he doesn't ever complete his quest unless you tell him. So yeah, let's just say no, he's a dumbass who can't get over that hurdle. But I feel like that's probably just being unfair. Anyway.
Line of those ideas. Starting with what we do know about Radagon of the Golden Order. Number 1, we know Radagon first appeared during the Liurnian Wars. Number 2, we know that here he battled Rennala of the Full Moon. Number 3, we know they get married and end the war, combining the Order of the Erd Tree and the Fate of the Moon. Looking back further is tricky. It's speculated that before he appeared, Radagon split from Marika. Either Marika wanted a champion to fight for her, it was a result of taking Destined Death out of the Elden Ring, or maybe it was something Marika couldn't control. In any case, if Radagon split from Marika, it was around here. MadLuigi has a great video on the timeline of Radagon, with the idea of Radagon instead being a descendant of the Fire Giants explored as a potential origin story. This is based on their shared red hair that Radagon despised having, his general stony complexion, and his son Radahn being a massive Chad. It is
So if for some reason Jarhead does see this kind of a response video, a little bit of criticism is turn down the background music ever so slightly. If we're like a more content creator specific, it's pretty good to leave like the audio track 1, the main voice dialogue at about like -10 decibels, and then having background music anywhere from like 15 to 20 decibels below that.
It's clear that FromSoft deliberately made Radagon's backstory ambiguous, so I'm not sure anyone can answer this one. For now, I'll start by calling this Mystery A. So, Radagon married Rennala, then number 4. We know they had 3 children together, Radahn, Rykard and Rani. Number 5, we know that Radagon left Rennala for Marika after she banished Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, from the lands between. Why exactly he left is still one of the big mysteries.
So that point is a little bit contentious because we don't know whether or not Godfrey was already banished when Radagon left Rennala. It could have been that Radagon left Rennala to become Marika again, to banish Godfrey and then institute her new vision of order based on what Radagon / she learned in Rey Lucaria. But again, that is contentious. But I do think that's like kind of the most likely reading based on the events in game, but it isn't ever like made explicit anywhere.
Radagon theory doesn't know for sure how or why he did this, but it is speculated it could all be due to them being the same person. Marika needs a consort, Radagon can clearly have kids, they don't mind a bit of self-cest, and maybe the only one right for Marika is Marika. It's still a mystery and it's a big one, but Radagon theory does kind of help explain it. Why did Radagon, a simple champion, get chosen by Marika? Because Radagon is Marika. Why did Radagon straight up leave his loving wife for Marika? Because Radagon is Marika. This is how I feel the Radagon theory explains things without explaining things. We rely on us being able to understand a god-queen split husband hybrid 2-person situation, and I don't think many of us have much personal experience with this kind of thing. So I'll circle back to this later and try and find a more explanatory explanation. And let's call this one Mystery B. Next, number 6, we know that Radagon gave Rennala a great rune before he leaves, the Great Rune of the Unborn, inside her big amber egg. It's a big mystery to me how Radagon got hold of a great rune to begin with. Maybe Radagon being Marika means he can create one? Maybe, maybe not.
So I think those are all very, very good questions. It's one that we grapple with on this channel fairly frequently. We were even talking about this on the Discord a little bit after last night's stream, and even a little bit during last night's stream. This is going to like cause a bit of a stir, but technically we don't actually know if Radagon gave Rennala the amber egg when he left to go to Leyndell. We are told that, don't get me wrong, from both Muriel to a degree and Gideon more specifically, but it isn't ever referenced in an item description to make it more concrete. So there is a little bit of wiggle room, but there also isn't a ton of room for doubting Muriel and Gideon put together. But then again, their knowledge could be imperfect, perhaps similarly to how Goldmask's knowledge is imperfect about Radagon, which is kind of a one justification you could use for the Amber Rune or Amber Egg and the rune being gifted to Renala being a bit more questionable. This doesn't mean that he never gifted it to her. It's just like the timeline of it could be argued, perhaps. But I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about that. So Scaleezy says, it's possible being a god that Mariko is able to exist fully in two bodies as two different people, so Marika didn't need to disappear while Radagon was out and about. Yeah, so we don't really know whether or not they ever had two bodies, which is really annoying. And I operate on the belief that they only had one body just because I haven't been shown otherwise yet. And so I can't exactly disprove the absence of evidence, so I just kind of go with what I have for now. Eamon says, we do know that Renala gave Radagon a wedding gift. It could have been the first gift he gave her. That's an interesting idea as well, that I don't think I considered it that way. But either way, I don't really feel as though that answers the mysteries of when he gave her the egg and why exactly she had it in relation to where did that great rune come from if it was taken from the Elden Ring. That really shouldn't happen, maybe. Is it a byproduct of when Destined Death got sealed? It's just all super vague and doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the only thing that kind of makes sense to me is that the Great Rune could have, potentially come from Radagon himself, which is annoying because it's kind of more of like Miquella's representation of a Great Rune shard, but maybe Miquella never actually got a Great Shard after the Shattering, and so anyway, moving beyond that, if it isn't like the Great Shard of the Elden Ring, like after the Shattering, then perhaps it's kind of the equivalent of a Tarnished's Mending Rune, but we don't really know. Beans and Rice sees Radagon as a bit of a vigilante or possibly usurper. That's probably where this theory is coming from. You think he's trying to control or take over America? Yeah, I do think that's the most likely interpretation here, but we'll see where this goes.
I'll leave this one as Mystery C for now. And lastly, number 7, Radagon goes to Lanedale and gets married to Marika. Now Radagon's timeline has joined up with Marika's, so going back, here's a brief timeline for Marika. Number 1, we know Marika is a Newman, a people from outside the Lands Between. Number 2, we know for sure that Godfrey fought for Marika against the Fire Giants. Number 3, we know at the birth of the Golden Order, Marika gave the Rune of Destined Death to her shadow-bound half-brother hound Malekith to seal it away. Number 4, we know after defeating the Fire Giants, she married Godfrey, her first husband and the first Elden Lord. Number 5...
So this part right here is a little bit contentious. We don't actually know when she marries Godfrey. It could have been before the war against the Giants. And we also technically don't know when Malekith was given the Rune of Death, but that doesn't really discredit this part of things here. It could have happened with the war against the Giants and the birth of the Erdtree, or it could have potentially happened when Radagon became Elden Lord. So this is kind of vague and where it's set up, which is perfectly fine. And we can argue all night and all day about this point specifically, so I'll just leave that alone for now.
We know they went to have 3 children together, Godwyn and the Omen twins Morgoth and Mohg. Number 6, it's generally accepted that around this time the First and Second Leonian Wars happened, where we know Radagon first appears. And then number 7, we know Marika banished Godfrey away from the Lands Between as a Tarnished. Godfrey's banishment is the accepted trigger for Radagon to leave Renala and return to Lanedale.
When Godfrey first...
Again, that was one thing that I do think is a little bit contentious, but not exactly. It's just slightly different. It could have just been all kind of jumbled together rather than Godfrey gets banished and then Radagon leaves. It could have been Radagon left to banish Godfrey and then pick up the throne, but we just don't have direct info about that.
Elden Lord was hounded from the Lands Between. Radagon left Rennala to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord.
So now we have Marika and Radagon together in one place. So for their joint timeline after marriage, number 1, we know that Radagon's children with Rennala were now classed as demigods. Number 2, we know for certain that Radagon and Marika had 2 children, Malenia and Mikola. Number 3, we know that after Ranni stole a fragment of the Rune of Death, the Black Knife assassins murdered Marika's son Godwyn. Why and how Godwyn's death went down is another big mystery. There's a lot of evidence and speculation that Marika was a part of setting up the Knight of Black Knives, potentially to unbind herself from the Two Fingers and the Greater Will. We don't really know yet. We know of Ranni's involvement from her questline, but we don't know about Marika's. Safe to say, I'll call this mystery D for now. Number 8, we know that Marika shattered the Elden Ring after the death of Godwyn drove her to the brink. Number 9, we know that Radagon tried to repair the Elden Ring. Number 10, we know that shards of the Elden Ring were inherited by Marika's children. And lastly, number 11, we know that Marika disappeared, secretly being locked away in the Erdtree as punishment for going against the Greater Will. That was all very quick, and again, this is just one version of the timeline. Everything here is still up for debate. As I said though, this is the generally accepted series of events. So far, I've listed these 4 mysteries. A. Where did Radagon come from before the Liurnian Wars? B. Why did Radagon leave Rennala after Marika banished Godfrey? C. How did Radagon have a great rune to give Rennala? And D. Who was involved in the Night of the Black Knives?
So just a kind of like content creator thing. I think that was a really good summary of events here, and I also like the additional summary at the end that makes things really streamlined and easy to follow. So kudos to that. And so 00083, welcome into the stream. And what did Eamon say? Eamon said that the Rune of Death and the other runes from Fair Missoula are nowhere to be found in the Golden Order's Elden Ring, and Goldmask's endings makes clear that other people messed up with the Ring as Lords. Yeah, and so does Muriel in a way. Muriel throws some stank on Radagon by saying that this time the blessing won't be squandered, or something along those lines, which is just kind of really funny. Scowleezy says, Marika going into the Erdtree to do god business is pretty good cover for her to go out as Radagon. The important question is if Marika was missing in action the entire time Radagon was married to Rennala. Yeah, and if Marika is missing in action, that's just kind of like a weird thing to try to justify, but I think you can make the excuse that Marika was known for her mischief, so maybe her followers just kind of accepted her doing whatever the hell she wanted. I mean, she's God after all. What are they going to do? Like, tell her what to do? Eamon says, it's pretty clear to them that Marika directly tried to modify the ring to modify or perfect life. Yeah. Like I said, we could argue about that stuff all day. I like to do it, but maybe now isn't the best time. Let's go back to the video, and we'll probably like touch upon the subject a lot more as it goes on, so I don't want to get ahead of it.
We don't really know the answers to any of these yet. These are the big mysteries FromSoft has deliberately left ambiguous. The Radica theory tries its best, but we just don't know. Alongside this timeline, I want to list the big pieces of evidence that point towards Radica and Marika being the same person. The biggest ones found in the game are: number 1, a skeleton in Radagon's closet being hidden by a sculptor within a big statue of him in Lane Dale. This is the one that transforms and gives us the message Radagon is Marika. Number 2, Brother Corrin and Goldmask both talk about and acknowledge Radagon being Marika when you tell them the message of this statue. Number 3, Melina echoes Marika in the Queen's bedchamber, where Marika calls Radagon mine other self. Number 4, Malenia's remembrance says that her and Mikola were born from a single god, which is why they are Imperials. Number 5, the final boss fight begins with Marika morphing into Radagon. And number 6, there's a constant duality between Radagon and Marika in the Elden Ring trailers and in the opening cutscene.
So that was a very fantastic summary of the events here. I think that's pretty pretty solid in terms of the presentation there. I don't even really think he's missing anything on that for like the Radica theory.
While I was thinking about this video, I almost gave up after finding each of these pieces of evidence. It felt like I was crazy to doubt that Radagon is Marika. Why bother trying to fight all this evidence?
To be fair here, even with all of these bits of evidence, you still can potentially argue that Radigan splitting off from her to some degree is possible even within this framework, because we do know that if Radigan came from America, they were probably one being at some point. So you could potentially argue with like the whole shattering thing that we saw there. But even then, like, I don't think that's that big a deal, because we're told that America and Radigan were kind of already wed at that point when the shattering happened. So that's really not that big a deal to me. And then everything else about Radigan is also like post marriage. So we still don't actually know about his early life, in all fairness. So just to give our friend Jarhead a little bit of wiggle room to work with.
I actually did pack everything up a couple of times, but I couldn't stop thinking about some gnawing ideas. Each time I did think back, I found issues with even these pieces of evidence. Issues that I think can be resolved. A theory that might go further than Radica theory. So, with all that groundwork out of the way, it's time to piece together this different theory. One that I've been thinking about since my first playthrough, a theory I can't shake and one I think fits better. I hope I can make this new theory clear, especially its response to each of these 6 pieces of evidence for Radigan being America. If anyone actually watches this video, and if anyone can point out anything I've missed, I beg you please let me know. By the end, I hope you'll see where I'm coming from. To be clear, I don't think Radigan and Marika are or ever were one person. The best place to start is with the message Radigan is Marika.
That's a very bold claim. I'm trying to wonder how they're going to justify it.
When you next see them, Corian is now spooked by Goldmask's thoughts. He's been freaked out by Goldmask, who is apparently challenging Golden Order principles.
I've been gripped by a terrifying thought. The rhythms and calculus of the Master's finger betray a suspicion of the holism of the Golden Order, a conceit, I am afraid, that cannot be overlooked. Oh, but how could this be? I dread to even entertain the possibility, but somehow I cannot cast aside my doubts about the Master. Tell me, have I simply lost my head? Only, if the Master were true to the Golden Order, why would he think to breach this forbidden mount of fire?
Goldmask's contemplations have progressed since Lane's L, and at some point, in some way, have begun to conflict with the fundamentals of the Golden Order.
The Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god.
This is stated by Corrin a bit earlier in their questline, so I think this is the principle that Goldmask is apparently questioning. Radaga theory would assume Marika being two people is the idea that's upsetting Corrin, but Radagon being Marika didn't conflict with Corrin to begin with, so why would it now? It must be Goldmask's contemplations on the key phrase, Radagon is Marika, that is causing Corrin's doubts. It's made Goldmask, great scholar of the Golden Order, think of ideas that are apparently blasphemous. So is the phrase, Radagon is Marika, a key to unravelling a secret layer of truth? One that would be blasphemous and incompatible to Golden Order fundamentalism? To be clear, I'm saying it's not Radagon being Marika that upsets Corrin. He was fine with accepting Radagon being Marika. After all, I guess if Radagon is Marika, then they're both still Marika, so she's still the one true god. It was later that Goldmask's new thoughts and theories upset him. What were these thoughts? Why was Corrin so shook up? We sadly don't get any more transcriptions out of Corrin. All we know is that Goldmask was triggered by the key phrase, Radagon is Marika.
So it's kind of questionable how much we should take Corrin's reactions at face value, because he might have just heard like Radagon is Marika, and obviously that should be a very like thought-provoking phrase to hear just randomly out of the blue, but he said he didn't really understand, so maybe he was just waiting for Goldmask's proofs to go along with it. And I feel like once Goldmask kept going along with that, the more Corrin began to doubt in Goldmask, which is kind of funny because no matter which way you take Corrin and his beliefs, the fact that he has on like the prophet robe, which says that they all saw fire in the Erd Tree essentially, but he's confused by Goldmask going up to the Forbidden Mount of Fire, it's a little bit of a mismatch in terms of what you would expect of the character. And then we also have the weird ass stuff with Corrin rejecting the incantations of the two fingers with everything. So Corrin is a little bit of a mess, but that, to be fair, that doesn't mean like we should completely discredit everything about him. It's just like, I think we need to like look at the whole picture, and Corrin could have used some tender love and care perhaps in terms of like crafting his character. More lore than there seems. Welcome into the stream. Scowleasy says, TLDR, Corrin is not upset Radagon is Marika. He's upset Goldmask is getting to the conclusion that Marika was wrong and her order was flawed. Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. You could make the argument that Corrin doesn't really care if Radagon is Marika, as Scowleasy just said, but going back to that idea of Corrin saying that Goldmask doubts the holism of the Golden Order, it's not as clear in English, but I mean, you can still reach that conclusion for sure. But holism in terms of Japanese comes from kanzen, which means like perfect, complete, or whole. So holism. And Goldmask is doubting the perfection of the Golden Order, which is kind of true, but also kind of not towards the end of it. Like, Goldmask is sort of right, but the issue Goldmask has with the perfection of the Golden Order is the god itself. So Goldmask does kind of actually become blasphemous because he says, that Marika Radagon person, they suck. Let's make an order where we don't have to rely on such figure. I don't know. Anyway, let's go back in.
To begin producing ideas that go against the Golden Order principles. As I've said, I think it's the one Corrin mentioned earlier, Marika is the one true god. And here, I think the phrase Radagon is Marika is indeed some sort of key, a key to a truth that unravels this principle. Radagon is Marika doesn't simply mean one person, two bodies. I think Radagon is Marika means something darker. So what else could this message mean? It's my theory that Radagon went to Leyndell to usurp Marika as god of the Golden Order. And, as this would go against Marika being the one true god, my theory is that he did this in secret. Radagon shackled Marika in the Erd Tree, creating a facade of order, pretending that Marika was still in control.
Maybe something went titso with it. Maybe it's been broke for a good long time. The Erd Tree, I'm saying.
Radagon ruled as Queen Marika, and crucially, I think this happened soon after he arrived in Leyndell. This would mean the Golden Order hasn't been ruled by Marika for a long, long time. This is something the sculptor figured out. A lot of what we thought to be Marika was actually Radagon. He's pulling off one massive masquerade.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the Vision's vessel.
This would mean Radagon is Marika because he's pretending to be her, whilst desperately trying to mend the Elden Ring. And the more I've thought of Radagon secretly usurping Marika, the more I've seen it fitting in with more and more of the lore. For example, using the usurping theory changes how we can view the words of Marika spoken by Melina in the Queen's bedchamber.
In Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both. Mine other self.
Thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. If Radagon was there to usurp Marika, then this choice of wording is interesting. It makes it appear that Marika knew Radagon's intentions. She knew he was sent by the Greater Will to take her place. You are here to become me, the god of the Golden Order. This is also the only direct conversation I can think of between Marika and Radagon. And if Marika was imprisoned in the Erdtree soon after his arrival in Leyndell, this might be the first and last conversation she has with Radagon. It might not be a coincidence that this conversation happens in the Queen's bedchamber, right next to the entrance to the Erdtree where she's imprisoned. We know from the trailer that shattering the Elden Ring took a physical toll on Marika's body, so if it did lead to Radagon heading for Leyndell, then maybe she wasn't strong enough to stop him. Maybe she did fight back. Maybe she's pretty much dead when Radagon shackles her in the Erdtree, keeping her as a vessel for the Elden Ring. Using this theory, her use of the phrase mine other self is interesting as well. It could hint at Marika knowing he would continue to use her image to maintain adherence to the Golden Order. If Radagon usurped Marika as soon as
Mine other self.
If Radagon was there to usurp Marika, then this choice of wording is interesting. It makes it appear that Marika knew Radagon's intentions. She knew he was sent by the Greater Will to take her place. You are here to become me, the god of the Golden Order. This is also the only direct conversation I can think of between Marika and Radagon. And if Marika was imprisoned in the Erdtree soon after his arrival in Leyndell, this might be the first and last conversation she has with Radagon.
Okay. Hold on. Let me go forward a little bit more.
It might not be a coincidence that this conversation happens in the Queen's bedchamber, right next to the entrance to the Erdtree where she's imprisoned. We know from the trailer that shattering the Elden Ring took a physical toll on Marika's body, so if it did lead to Radagon heading for
Okay, that's what got me a little bit confused. Let me reconcile this real quick.
That shattering the Elden Ring took a physical toll on Marika's body, so if it did lead to Radagon heading for Leyndell, then maybe she wasn't strong enough to stop him. Maybe she did fight back. Maybe she's pretty much dead when Radagon shackles her in the Erdtree.
So I'm a little bit unclear on his timeline of events with this. Is he trying to say that the shattering occurred when Radagon went to Leyndell? Because if so, I would strongly disagree with that. I don't think that's what he's trying to say, but if so, like, this transition here needed a little bit of work. Let me back up once again, because I'm pretty confident that's not what he's trying to imply, but it can come across that way, unfortunately.
To the Erdtree where she's imprisoned. We know from the trailer that shattering the Elden Ring took a physical toll on Marika's body, so if it did lead to Radagon heading for Leyndell, then maybe she wasn't strong enough to stop him. Maybe she did fight back. Maybe she's pretty much dead when Radagon shackles her in the Erdtree, keeping her as a vessel for the Elden Ring. Using this theory, her use of the phrase mine other self is interesting as well. It could hint at Marika knowing he would continue to use her image to maintain adherence to the Golden Order.
Okay, I think that part right there is kind of the biggest stretch of this theory so far, but setting that aside, I was going to pause the video soon and comment anyway that her comments to Radagon and... what did she say exactly? Oh yeah, Leal Hound. I could just look that up. That'll bring it here. So, in Marika's own words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered both, mine other self. So, this makes it sound to me that the two should have already been together at this point, and I believe her referencing let us be shattered both here is meant to coincide with her going on to then shatter the Elden Ring itself, and trying to retroactively justify calling Radagon her other self when they aren't technically together at that point just feels like a very, very big stretch to me.
If Radagon usurped Marika as soon as he got to Leyndell, and if he wanted to ensure continued worship of Marika, then this facade must have been going on for a long time, allowing him to focus on repairing the Elden Ring for the Greater Will. But how could he pull this deception off? Well, for some reason, the shape-shifting item is also known as Marika's Mischief. FromSoft deliberately decided to directly link this item to Marika herself. She was a Newman, like the Nox from the Eternal Cities, who are associated with mimicry, I guess. We know that Radagon studies Marika's incantations, and maybe this included some sort of disguising arts. This puts some form of disguising or mimicry on the table for how Radagon could pose as Marika for such a long time. As a whole, this idea desperately needs more investigation, which I don't think can be done if we just assume they're the same person. But the idea of Radagon using Mischief to pretend to be Marika works with another point. Marika's damaged body did turn into Radagon at the beginning of the final boss fight. I want to point out the flowing black goo stuff sticking out of the cracks in his body, as to me this seems to be the Elden Beast flowing inside him. When you defeat Radagon, the second phase begins and the Elden Beast emerges. It grasps Radagon's body, turning him into the sacred relic sword, symbolising him as an instrument for the Golden Order and the Greater Will. We triumph though, and you find Marika's crumbling body remaining inside the Erdtree, her head lying on the floor next to her. But if Radagon became this sword for the Elden Beast, and if we've defeated the Elden Beast, then where does she come from? Could this be the real Marika? The first Marika that turns into Radagon could just be the disguise he's perfected. I know this might seem like I'm reaching for answers for this theory, but I think this has some room to grow. Let's explore this idea further and humour the idea that Radagon did chain up Marika soon after he arrives in Leyndell. Bear with me as this theory shakes up the timeline in an interesting way. First, all the actions we know Marika did herself would need to be moved before Radagon arrived in the capital. Most importantly, this moves the death of Godwyn and the shattering of the Elden Ring backwards, so they happen much earlier. And to my own surprise, this is supported by a piece of dialogue for JaR. I remembered one piece of his dialogue that referred to both these events, but I realised a problem that I'd missed before. JaR contradicts himself about Godwyn's death and Marika shattering the Elden Ring.
The misshapen corpse on the Stormveil. That is a sacred relic of the Black Knives plot, as that famed night of assassination is known. It happened during the golden age of the Erdtree, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the Black Blade, and on a bitter night murdered Godwyn the Golden. That was the first recorded death of a demigod in all history, and it became the catalyst. Soon, the Elden Ring was smashed, and thus sprang forth the war known as the Shattering.
He says that Godwyn's death was long before the Elden Ring was shattered, and then says it was soon after his death. He does put the Night of the Black Knives during the Age of the Erdtree, where...
So this is a kind of theory that's come up surprisingly often to me, that Roger contradicts himself, but I don't see that contradiction by any means. I'm going to go ahead back and replay it just to comment on it a bit more directly.
...himself about Godwyn's death and Marika shattering the Elden Ring.
The misshapen corpse on the Stormveil. That is a sacred relic of the Black Knives plot, as that famed night of assassination is known. It happened during the golden age of the Erdtree, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring.
So right here, he's not exactly wrong. He's saying that the golden age of the Erdtree was before the shattering of the Elden Ring, and you could make the argument that the golden age itself predates the shattering by a long period in terms of like when it first appeared on the timeline. Let me double check Roger's Japanese dialogue, and this might be why I never really thought about this too much. So where are we at? happened during the age of the golden age of the Erdtree, long before the shattering. So, yeah, he says it happened during the ancient Erdtree period before the Elden Ring got shattered, which, you know, isn't that big a deal. And then he says, and then they say it became the trigger of the Elden Ring being shattered, and then like the Shattering War, essentially.
Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the Black Blade, and on a bitter night, murdered Godwyn the Golden. That was the first recorded death of a demigod in all history, and it became the catalyst. Soon, the Elden Ring was...
So the issue here is the word soon, but that doesn't really exist in the Japanese. But even setting that aside, that doesn't really contradict what came before. So like, the idea is Godwyn was killed during the age of the Erdtree, and then soon after his death, the shattering of the Elden Ring occurred, and then the Shattering War happened as well. So let me...
smashed, and thus sprang forth the war known as the Shattering.
So yeah, even in English, I would disagree about there being an actual contradiction in Roger's dialogue here. And then I do have some more that I want to comment about the whole idea of Radagon being Marika in like the statue description, but I might just save that a little bit later for a big reveal. So you guys have also been talking a bit in the chat. Yeah, I don't mind if this is a hot take. Like, even if I'm like initially opposed to something, I don't really mind trying to rethink the paradigm of things if it makes sense. And right now, like, I'm willing to entertain the idea that the shattering could have happened way earlier, but I do think there is a lot to contradict it that might be kind of hard to articulate in this kind of like live setting, just right off the top of my head. But we'll see. To more lore than there seems, it seems Radagon has to be big because Radahn has to be big because he's Radagon's child with all the red hair connections and the giant stuff. Radagon has to be related to giant stuff, therefore Radagon can't be just Marika. Well, there is the potential that Marika was actually cursed by the giants for killing them, and then that curse could have been like pushed from her onto Radagon, or maybe she split herself to like stop that curse from infecting her. You can kind of like headcanon some interesting things about that to say that like Marika is Radagon and that he is also kind of not her at the same time. I don't know. Eamon says, Radahn having a great rune that burns and also being giant just makes you think his great rune governs the element of fire that once belonged to them, like the rune of death governed death. It's a little bit weird to say it that way because we have also been told that the Flame of Ruin was sealed after the war against the giants. So if that rune was sealed, if that flame was sealed, but Radahn controls it, it would seem to be like a little bit of a contradiction, maybe. The shard bearers influenced their runes, but the runes also influenced their shard bearers, yeah. And in earlier like pieces of what's the word? Pre-production? No. Pre-release content, Radahn was said to be the slayer of giants. So there, at one point in development, they seem to be more directly connected, at least with him and fire. I have wondered whether or not, if Radahn was originally slated to kill the giants, if that meant that Radagon halted the stars, which would make a lot of sense with like the whole Carian astrology being withered on the vine by her marriage to Radagon and like him kind of representing the Golden Order. We were told the rot was sealed and Melania still came about, to be fair. Eamon, I don't know how familiar you are with my views, but I have a very controversial, spicy hot take that's not so hot in my opinion, that Destined Death was only sealed when Radagon became Elden Lord, and in so sealing death, that allowed Scarlet Rot to proliferate wildly because death no longer slowed its growth. And so I think Melania and Mikola could be kind of symbolic of what would happen when death is removed from the Order and boundless life is left to its own devices. So, like, Scarlet Rot may have been sealed before that, but once death gets sealed, there's no more stopping it, which is why it could have been not that big a deal, but now that Melania is born, it is a big deal. But again, if you do want more about that info, I talk a lot about it on one of my streams, which I also have ported to the main channel page, where it's talking about the Great Tree, the Crucible, the Golden Order, and Destined Death. Alright, let's go back. Oops.
He says that Godwyn's death was long before the Elden Ring was shattered, and then says it was soon after his death. He does put the Knight of the Black Knives during the Age of the Erdtree, where this theory needs it to be, but I
So again, okay, I'm curious.
wanted to check the Japanese version to see if it actually was soon followed by Marika smashing the Elden Ring. Luckily, I found a recent post where someone noticed the same contradiction. Discussing this issue regarding Roger's dialogue, user Lamy1 made this translation. In the prosperous era of the ancient Golden Tree, before the Elden Ring got shattered, someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith? From the Black Sword. In a cold night, Godwyn the Golden got murdered, becoming the first demigod to die in history. It is said that breaking the Elden Ring became the notch that would lead to the start of the Shattering War. As we know,
it's weird that he used Nosh instead of like Trigger or something. Oh yeah. So if I'm remembering correctly, like Lamy is Sabaku no Maiku, and so he's like an Italian translator. They might be different people, but I'm pretty sure like Lamy is Italian or something like that. So English isn't their native tongue, and so that's why like some of these things are going to be a little bit slightly off. So like Notch can kind of mean trigger, like in a like literal sense, in terms of like if you think of how like a crossbow works, you can pull the string back and attach it to a notch that once you release the notch, it becomes like the trigger that allows the crossbow to function. And Maraketh is essentially just Malekith, but just R and L are a little bit indistinguishable in Japanese sometimes. Let me look at this. I don't think there's anything too wrong about this other than like that. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death. Okay. On the night of cold, Godwyn the Golden was killed. Yep, okay. That was the first death of a demigod in history. Okay. The Elden Ring was shattered. The Shattering War occurred, and it was said to be the trigger of that. It is said the breaking of the Elden Ring. Oh, I would disagree with this part here, in that I think the subject is still referring to the murdering of Godwyn being here. So, like, it is said that murdering Godwyn became the trigger which caused the Shattering and then the Shattering War. So yeah, I mean, it's significant, but in the context of this, it's not that big a deal. Eric Williams, welcome in. You're sorry if it's super off topic. Could you give a yes or no answer? But do you think Gehrman is the Orphan of Kos? I think it's complicated. I wouldn't say like it's a 1-to-1 thing though, no. But I think like the Orphan of Kos could just be like haunting Gehrman. And or like it could be like a manifestation of actual like Gehrman's nightmares and remorse. So it's arguable. And also welcome to the stream if I forgot to say that.
No, translating is a tough business, and it wouldn't be wise to base everything on a translation. But it does agree with a few things. First, it agrees that the death of Godwyn was a catalyst for shattering the Elden Ring, but without suggesting a time frame. Second, it
Sort of.
places the Knight of the Black Knives during the Age of Plenty,
No.
a time when Godfrey was known to still be around. Luckily for this theory, that means before Radagon went to Lanedale.
So I would strongly disagree with that, and so now I understand where like a lot of the hang-ups are coming from. So, of course, oh no, I did get that. Yeah, okay. Anyway, let me just pull this up, the thing that I've been like looking at for you guys. So, hopefully you can see it a bit better. Where are we at? A golden age of the Erd Tree. So this does say like the ancient Erd Trees period, and when the Elden Ring had yet to be shattered. So if you do take this reference to the ancient Erd Tree to be the same reference to the ancient Erd Tree that's mentioned in the ancient Erd Tree incantations, I could understand why you could make the argument that it is related to the Age of Plenty. But this is where I would say we might have an instance of Roger's knowledge being a little bit unreliable because he isn't exactly from this period of time, so he doesn't have first-hand knowledge. And we do know that Radagon did have to exist, and okay, you know, I think I'll just wait because I think he's probably going to come into another point that I'll be able to address next. But yeah, okay, I'll just wait a second. It's all good, Eric.
Unfortunately for Godwyn, that means he died a lot sooner than first thought. And third, Rani must have also stolen the Fragments of Death before Radagon had even left Renala. In particular with Mystery D and the Knight of the Black Knives, as said, Rani must have stolen the fragment during this Age of Plenty. As she confirms with us, her plan for the Black Knives assassination was to fight against her Empyrean status and the will of the Two Fingers. This means she would have been named as a potential replacement for Marika before she was promoted to demigod status. What makes someone an Empyrean is confusing enough, as is Marika's possible reaction to having her replacement already decided for her by the Two Fingers. I'm not really going to focus on Mystery D, Marika.
Okay, so this will give me enough of a reference point to like tie it into you guys directly. So with him mentioning that Rani was an Empyrean, I do think it is important to note how even Rani compares herself to Miquella and Melania. And so I think in her mind, Miquella and Melania being demigod Empyreans shows that they were contemporaries, and this kind of derails Jarhead's timeline here, especially when we have a potential direct relationship with Miquella and Godwyn, with the whole like golden epitaph being a reference between Miquella like mourning the death of his older brother. You might be able to argue that Miquella may have just been a kind-hearted individual who mourned the death of an older brother whom he'd never met, but I don't really feel as though that rings true to me, and I doubt it would probably ring true to a lot of people as well. So, yeah, I think trying to argue the shattering happened before Radagon properly wed Marika invalidates Miquella and Melania in the timeline, and that just kind of derails this stuff. They're not fully incompatible, to be fair, and so this is more of a vibe check and a little bit of a game text that's different, because there are like a bunch of the ghosts that talk about Miquella potentially having a more like personal relationship with Godwyn. Questionably because I guess you could try to make the argument that Miquella did that stuff like without properly knowing Godwyn, and it could have been to advance his own agenda. It just doesn't really jive well with me, though. And yeah, as Asenek says, I don't know if that statue with Miquella and Melania is technically Godwyn. I do think it's a very strong possibility. So that's why I didn't want to like say it as like part of this whole airtight defense or attack on this theory, just because I know not everybody is going to accept that as explicit and like a confirmation one way or the other. And devil's advocates could also argue that Mikola may have wanted a commission after the fact. But anyway, thanks for bringing that up still, because I thought about it, but yeah.
In the fragment during this Age of Plenty. As she confirms with us, her plan for the Black Knives assassination was to fight against her Empyrean status and the will of the Two Fingers. This means she would have been named as a potential replacement for Marika before she was promoted to demigod status. What makes someone an Empyrean is confusing enough, as is Marika's possible reaction to having her replacement already decided for her by the Two Fingers. I'm not really going to focus on Mystery D, Marika's involvement in Godwyn's death, as this video is getting way too long for me to handle already. But the Black Knife plot happening earlier does fit the timeline for the Radagon usurped Marika theory. One thing this does tell us is that the Two Fingers were already using their power and authority over other people besides Marika at this time. Within the community, there's also a fair bit of speculation on why Marika shattered the Elden Ring. To protect her children by weakening the Greater Will? To give them more power through Great Runes? We don't know for certain. We do know that Marika has doubts about the Golden Order.
I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past.
We do know that Marika told her children.
I think that passage also directly contradicts this theory, because this shows Marika's support for Radagon and his views. So unless he wants to claim that this is the Radagon Marika, I don't think it really works together. And if you want to make the claim that Radagon was pretending to be Marika, it does also make like the spoken echoes and the lingering there a bit at odds with how Melina can still pick them up. Although I do believe JaR had said like maybe he truly did become her after the fact, and maybe you could justify things that way. But anyway, this shows to me that Golden Order fundamentalism was not part of Marika's original MO, but it did later become part of her MO. And trying to think of some other stuff that becomes really awkward to piece together if the shattering happened before everything. Maybe like the Karian astrology withering on the vine. That would be a lot harder to explain if the shattering happened before Radagon met Marika, I guess. Or maybe you could then argue that Karian astrology still worked and it was still part of the Elden Ring, but then once the ring got shattered, it no longer worked? Maybe? I don't know.
Children to choose their own destiny.
Hear me, demigods. My children, beloved, make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, be it a god. But should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices.
So I'm inclined to agree with Agent Jake's take from his video on Marika's great plan, and speculate that Marika herself gave the Great Runes to her children. She could have been forced to break up the Elden Ring because Ranni screwed up her big plan, using the plot to destroy her own body, freeing her soul from the grasp of the Two Fingers. It could be to protect her other children from dying like Godwyn. Either way, I speculate that the Great Runes were given by Marika and not found or won by the demigods during their wars. Godfrey might have still been around at this time, as Godwyn's death was during the Golden Age. I couldn't find anything mentioning Godwyn and Godfrey together, which is why I always assumed Godfrey was gone before his son's death. We know that Marika told him to
brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erd Tree.
So another big point to bring up in relation to the idea of Marika giving the children specifically with his timeline is how then does he explain that Millennia had a shard of the Elden Ring? Did she take it from other gods like Godfrey? Or was it something that she had implicitly? With the opening trailer showing her coming into a standoff with Radahn and having her full army amassed with like Mikola and Mikola kind of creating the Halig tree, I do think that really pokes a lot of holes in this theory. Not that I totally dislike it, I just don't think there's enough evidence for it, unfortunately. Or maybe there's like more counter evidence rather than it not having evidence, perhaps. I don't know.
So he must have had the Elden Ring himself, at least at some point. And Marika would need it back to shatter it. Maybe she needed Godfrey gone for this as well. I want to put the shattering of the Elden Ring very close to Godfrey leaving the Lands Between, and actually move his banishment to just before Marika shattered it. Having this moved before Radagon was in Leyndell also really helps address the duality between Radagon and Marika in both the trailers and opening cutscene. They are purposefully mirrored. One breaks the Elden Ring, the other repairs the Elden Ring, but I don't agree that this was showing them flickering between each other. If it was smashed soon after Godwyn's death, then Radagon was not at the capital, so he would be repairing the Elden Ring at a much later time than it was shattered. I don't know why seeing them both in the story trailer felt like the biggest hurdle for this theory. The matching cracks that appear across their shoulder was enough to make me doubt everything about the usurping idea. But now I feel confident this version of the timeline has enough to show it was just an artistic choice from FromSoft. Moving the events in this way will also affect part of Radagon's timeline. Specifically, Mystery B, why did he leave Rennala? Muriel is the one that suggests Godfrey's banishment was the trigger for Radagon to leave Rennala. But if this event is closely linked to Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring, what if breaking the Elden Ring itself was the real trigger for Radagon to go to Leyndell? And what if this was triggered by a direct instruction from the Greater Will?
Queen Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision. A god in truth. But after the Elden Ring's shattering, she was imprisoned in the Erd Tree, a grim punishment for shattering the Order, despite her godhood.
We know that the strength of the Golden Order comes from the Elden Ring, and we know breaking the Elden Ring was a great sin, weakening the Golden Order. And we know
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence.
So, from the moment she shattered the Elden Ring, she was marked for punishment by the Fingers. And what's the one thing we know for certain about Radagon?
O Radagon, Leal Hound of the Golden Order.
We are told repeatedly that Radagon is a fundamentalist, completely loyal, the Leal Hound of the Golden Order. As a fundamentalist, I don't think it's hard to believe he would be completely compelled to follow direct orders of the Two Fingers and the Greater Will, including leaving his family, and a heavy sentence must be enacted to punish Marika for shattering the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring being already broken also goes some way to explain Mystery C. How did Radagon have a great rune to give to Rennala? Okay, I don't really know how he got it, but let's talk about this great rune. We know Radagon gives this to Rennala just before he leaves. This rune has the power of allowing someone to be reborn. What's the significance of Radagon having this particular great rune just before he leaves Rennala? As I'm speculating, he was called by the Greater Will to punish Marika and rebuild the Elden Ring. Being commanded by the Greater Will as a firm, faithful follower to the Golden Order, this would surely be a task Radagon would feel obligated to carry out. But that would mean leaving his wife and kids behind. For me at least, that's a great personal sacrifice to carry out. Surely then, it makes sense that Radagon gave the Great Rune of the Unborn to Rennala to have her use its rebirth ability on himself, to have himself reborn as the perfect instrument for the Golden Order. This is an inherently tragic theory for the end of their marriage. Here's a man, called to a duty he cannot abandon, with a family he must leave, and a devoted wife who herself acts as the agent of his rebirth. She is creating a wholly new person, whose sole purpose was to leave her forever. For me, having a soft spot for all the Prepare to Cry stories, this had me interpreting Rennala in a much more sympathetic way than during my first playthrough. And I think anyone who has someone special can imagine the pain of having to willingly let them go, sacrificing the person you love, watching them disappear as a new person takes their place. Such is the calling of their duty. I don't think I'd want to leave my room either. So at this point, there's one more mention of Radagon being Marika for this theory to tackle. I've briefly gone through the statue message, Radagon is Marika, Gold Mask and Corin's questline, Marika's words in the Queen's bedchamber, Marika turning into Radagon in the final boss fight, and the duality and imagery between Radagon and Marika in the trailers and opening cutscene. The last piece of direct evidence is written in Melania's remembrance. It clearly says that she and Miquella were born from a single god. If Radagon shackled up Marika as soon as he arrived at the capital, how could they have had two children together? Well, for this theory to work, it would need to imply something dark. Marika would need to have already been locked in the Erd Tree before the twins were born. And I personally think she would also essentially be dead at this point, just as a vessel for the Elden Ring. Either way, we know George R.R. Martin helped write Elden Ring, so the Game of Thrones-esque thing you have to imagine Radagon doing to Marika sounds to me like something he might write. It does.
So, we have a question in the chat and a comment. Eamon says that everything about the world outside the lands between and the cultures that seem to exist outside of it where the Tarnished live just feels strange if they left right before the Shattering. I agree with that comment, and I do have more to say about this video as well, but I do want to kind of have him finish his thoughts before I go into some of mine. And then More Lore Than There Seems says, how does the Baleful Shadow use Destined Death? Shouldn't that be sort of impossible, all things considered? I think that's a fantastic question that is fairly unresolved, because when you fight Blythe, he kind of has a version of Destined Death, but it doesn't exactly take away max HP. Like, it still continues to do HP damage over time. It definitely has the reddish-black flames that are similar to Destined Death, but some people think they're meant to be different because your max HP doesn't drop temporarily. I don't really think that matters too much, and while we might be able to argue that Destined Death is kind of controlled by the two fingers, we might have a kind of reason to substantiate that with the idea of Malekith being a quote-unquote Shadowhound beast, and Blythe also being a Shadowhound beast. So if the Rune of Death was sealed within the shadow that is Malekith, and Blythe is also a shadow, does that mean Destined Death is sealed in the same place that the shadow goes to? Are they kind of metaphysically connected somehow? Perhaps. There is an interesting line by the rolled finger reader crone where she says that burning the Erd Tree will unseal Destined Death and bring death to the world itself, which has made me wonder whether or not that's literally true. Is Destined Death sealed within the tree? Does that mean like Malekith is connected to the tree? Potentially, but with the whole DLC being titled The Shadow of the Erd Tree and potentially being related to Godwyn and Deathroot, there might be something to that line of thought there. So to answer your question directly, we don't really know. My best guess would be that Blythe and Malekith kind of share an innate nature by being Shadowhound beasts and or like just shadows entirely. So maybe they're just reaching into the shadows inside them and plucking death from that shadow, which is the shadow that got sealed upon the removal of the Rune of Death. Platypus Practicus, welcome back to the stream. You said you don't think that George R.R. Martin wrote stuff dealing with Radagon in America. Everything that's been said implies he wrote more of the backstory of the world rather than the present state or characters. It's kind of really questionable how much George R.R. Martin really contributed to the story, because even if he wrote the backstory for a lot of things, we have seen a bunch of random stuff kind of change in development between Morgoth being called the Elden Lord in 1.0, Radahn potentially like being the Slayer of Giants versus now like arresting the Cycle of the Stars. So either way, setting that stuff aside,
does fit for me at least. If this is the case,
knocks my mouse down. Setting that aside, I'm not sure that the whole self-possessed thing does come from George R.R. Martin. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We just don't have a lot of that concrete info. The way that I've understood it is he kind of made like more biopics for the demigods themselves rather than the entire setting for the most part. And we do have it pinned in the Discord. Like, there is a big document of the recorded interviews that George R.R. Martin gave in terms of like what he came up with the story for Elden Ring, and it seems really small to me, like all things considered, like smaller than I would have initially guessed based on just like how much he's credited by the game and Hidetaka Miyazaki himself. Did I say Shadowhound? I totally meant Shadowbound, but thanks. Yeah, and the Glowmide Queen was chosen by the finger, so maybe there is more of a connection there. It's literally impossible to know how much he knew. It could be literally nothing or most of it, and what specific parts are even more hard to discern. And yeah, that kind of makes it a lot more difficult to just talk about their influences and like where things were in throughout like the creation of the game. But anyway, yeah, I don't really feel like the George R.R. Martin touch is all over Ratigan and Marika, although I do get why others would feel that way. Yeah, we don't know how much George did.
Sounds to me like something he might write. It does fit for me at least. If this is the case, and the twins were born after Marika was already shackled, and potentially technically dead by then, this might be what the remembrance is referring to. They were born to a single god and a vessel. It might also explain why they were born suffering from curses. One with eternal youth, the other continually dying. One stagnant, the other decaying. Both like a pool of still water, like a stagnant vessel. There's definitely the most work needed for this bit, which is why I've left it last. That said, that's as much as I can think of on my own right now. I hope this has all remained coherent. I think I've tackled, or at least attempted to tackle, the way this theory works with the big 6 bits of evidence for Radica theory. And I hope I've shown how the usurping theory actually does work with all of them. I hope this also goes some way to fill the 4 big mysteries. Well, except for Mystery A. Where did Radican come from? I haven't said much on this. I'd like to think that he was just a small fire giant who loved the Golden Order. One thing I will say, we know this crisscross pattern on Radican's statue and on Radican's scar seal is the symbol used to represent him. And we know this pattern is in the main logo for the game. It underlines the entire Elden Ring. Maybe this is also one of the great runes in the Elden Ring, one that Marika needed to break through to remove the rune of Destined Death. And I don't know, maybe breaking through the...
That was... Yeah, that just doesn't follow, because like, Destined Death should have been already removed from the Elden Ring by the time she shattered it. But anyway.
This pattern in the Elden Ring made Radigan pop out of it? I don't know, you can speculate on any theory really. And to be real, my speculations might be wrong for everything in this video. Even so, playing through the game whilst looking at everything through the usurping theory was a lot of fun. And that's what makes this game so good to begin with. If you still think Radica theory wins, and that the Radican usurped Marika theory is all wrong, I'd greatly appreciate any discussions. I'm happy to be proven wrong. This is just a theory after all, it's not a manifesto. That said, if you did like this take on the lore, if you agree with some of it or disagree with most of it, or if it at least got you thinking about the lore in a different way, please also let me know. I didn't realise this video would be so long. As I've said, I've never done this before, so thank you for bearing with me as well. God damn, this is harder than you'd think.
He's right about that. Fudge, I was muted that entire time. Okay, so, damn, I wish I remembered when, like, what I started talking about. But anyway, okay, thanks for letting me know. It's sorry for not looking at chat. I was going to say to Jarhead, I really enjoyed the video. Obviously, I have a lot of major disagreements here, but I totally appreciate how they set up that they came to this theory and they kind of hit a wall and they were open to criticism and they were very clear about their shortcomings in that regard. So I did copy my video or copy his video and pasted it in the chat if you guys wanted to give him a like or anything like that. I also then was narrating me saying that I was going to leave a comment on his channel about what I just said here verbatim. I was just like reading it out loud slowly or saying it out loud as I typed it. I noticed that TA commented, I didn't read this though. He said, one quibble with the conclusions, but overall with their impression is wow, kudos to you. Fantastically well put together video. You think you have a real talent. Bear in mind it's probably random whether the YouTube algorithm will bless you, but I hope it does, and I hope you make more videos soon. Best of luck. That's a very sweet comment. Oh yeah, and that reminds me that I did say while I was muted that I did think this was a fantastically done video. It's produced very well. Just one very minor suggestion would be when they had the NPC dialogue going up at times to make sure that that audio is balanced between each ear. Not that it like really matters. I think it just helps the overall feeling of the video be more complete, where you don't just have like the character dialogue only coming in from like the left side channels or the right side channels. So it's a little bit more work to do, which is kind of annoying, but I think it just helps the presentation. So, oh, pressing space to pause muted myself. Okay, that makes sense. I hate it when I do that, or when it does that. I mean, it's definitely my fault, but maybe I just repeated myself, maybe I didn't. Hey Stella, welcome back to the stream. One of those things that if more evidence showed up, it wouldn't feel too out of nowhere. Yeah. You're a fan of the theory that Melina is the Gek, a Black Knife assassin, and Marika's daughter all at once. It sounds ridiculous, but it is actually really interesting. I agree that it does sound ridiculous. It also does sound troublingly plausible to some degree, which is very vexing. And thank you, Santeria1911, and also welcome to the stream. And Bella Can Soup, welcome in. The only trustworthy Elden Ring YouTuber is Dark Tark. I've never heard of them. If you have a video you want me to watch of theirs, or a couple, go ahead and like link them. Not in the chat, because I think like Nightbot kills it, or the YouTube chat kills it, but if you put it in the comments of this video, and or in the Discord, I'll try to add it to my playlist here. So, okay. Now that I've caught up with chat and officially unmuted myself, I do have a couple other things I wanted to mention about this video. So, I totally get where they're coming from with the idea of Radagon being Marika with the English text of the game. However, you do get kind of really kneecapped by
and the vision's vessel,
by the Japanese text of Muriel's dialogue when... No, not Muriel's dialogue. No, so not this one. So, okay. So this is the line that appears, in case we lose it, when... That's unfortunate. Okay. When you go into the Lindell and use the incantation to clear up the statue thing. Why can't I English right now? So we have... Okay, let's just turn this off because it's not going to help us. So we have Radagon, that which is called Radagon, Marika is. So in other words, that which is that which is Radagon is Marika. So the way that it sounds in English is kind of backwards from the Japanese here, where it's like Radagon is Marika. The Japanese is more like that which is Radagon is Marika. So Radagon is Marika rather than... Damn it, that sounds exact. Rather than Marika. So Marika is Radagon rather than Radagon is Marika. Yeah, okay. I just flubbed my own speech there. So just to reiterate, and I apologize for the redundancy here, that which is Ratigan is America. So it's not Ratigan is America, it's America is Ratigan, at least in the Japanese. I don't know if that would actually really influence Jarhead's thoughts here, but I do think it is kind of important to show that it's kind of backwards, but semantically the meaning is similar. So I don't really think I would say like that's a mistranslation. It's just like a case of localization that just like no matter what you choose, it can be kind of misleading. Because if they said America is Ratigan, I mean, I don't know. It's not that big a deal. Just anyway, going back to chat. Okay, you were joking. They do a lot of comedy stuff that you enjoy. Okay, I mean, even if you have a comedy skit, I'm willing to react to that stuff on stream. Sorry if you came off high and mighty. It's okay. I appreciate the candor. Oh man, I just made a pun. My apologies. All right. Okay. So that was a very good video. I think it was produced extremely well, especially for such a small channel. So with that being said, we do have a bit of time left in the stream, and we will move on to the Lore Hunters. Don't fall for the lie in Elden Ring that brought chaos to the world. So, or chaos to the lands between. Okay, here we go.
Why, hello there. During our travels in the lands between, we've all run across the nomadic merchants easily identified by their chapeau, their instrument, and their dog. They're found in the nooks and crannies of the world, sometimes in spots that make no sense for a shop, yet there they are and willing to sell their wares. However, underneath their affable and quirky demeanor, there lies a dark history. According to the item description of their chapeau, their clan once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being accused of heretical beliefs, their entire clan was rounded up and buried alive far underground. The merchants we meet are the last remnant of the Great Caravan, the few who dodged imprisonment by the Golden Order. They're often distrustful and hidden away not because they're terrible salesmen, but because they fear prejudice. Which brings us to some important questions. What were the heretical beliefs they were accused of? Why did the Golden Order bury the Great Caravan alive? And perhaps most importantly, are the accusations true? Like many of the questions Elden Ring raises, none of these have simple or concrete answers. In this video, we will explore the tragic history of the nomadic merchants, the Flame of Frenzy, and how the most reviled man in history brought chaos to the lands between. Implies that he...
Oh no, I tried to... Okay, that was a perfect thing there. So yeah, I was just going to say that's a very solid intro there. It really sets up our expectations, very factual and accurate.
First, I'd like to start by talking about the Flame of Frenzy and its history. Frenzy, at least in its current manifestation, came from the tomb of an ancient god. The fingerprint stone shield tells us that it is part of the tomb of an ancient god. The readerless fingers relayed their message through these imprints, said to be the very seeds from which Frenzy first sprouted. We learn from Enya the finger reader that the two fingers are envoys of the greater will. As representatives of the greater will, they convey messages they receive from the greater will, which are then interpreted by finger readers like Enya. So being readerless, the readerless fingers, also known as the three fingers, imprinted stones to convey their message. This begs the question, whose message is being conveyed and imprinted by the three fingers? There is not an explicit answer here, but I'll provide the context we have in my own interpretation. As stated previously, the three fingers are located in the tomb of an ancient god, which tells us a few things. The first is that the three fingers were sealed and buried below the earth, shunned. It is evident that the Golden Order considered the Three Fingers heretical, sealing them deep below the earth, behind a secret passage, and magically sealed by Morgott, who must be defeated to release the seal to make the tomb accessible.
So also one of the interesting things to me about Morgott's seal specifically there is that it is a seal of the Two Fingers rather than something like the Erd Tree or even like the Golden Order. Which, not that I would have expected Golden Order fundamentalism to be here, but I don't know.
By Morgott, who must be defeated to release the seal to make the tomb accessible. This makes sense when we consider the purpose of the tomb to house an ancient god. The Three Fingers have been sealed away for a long time, likely predating the Golden Order and belonging to a god that is not Marika. And to make sure that we are all on the same page, I'd like to briefly explain the evidence for previous orders and gods. The Remembrance of the Dragon Lord says, "The Dragon Lord, whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return. Like Godfrey, Placidusax was an Elden Lord in another age, and the Dragon Lord's equivalent of Marika disappeared."
I will spare you all from my normal rant about Placidusax not being Elden Lord, but I kind of just didn't with my kind of rhetorical device there. So anyway, I disagree with that statement, but we'll just kind of move on.
This is unlikely to be the same god the ancient tomb of the Three Fingers was built for, but it's a good example of how the Golden Order and Marika are just the latest order and goddess to wield the Elden Ring, not the first.
Oh yeah, the other thing that I did want to mention, even though I always go on my spiel about this description specifically, and it being hearsay that Placidusax was the Elden Lord, this last line of dialogue I don't think I don't contest this because this uses like factual based language. So Placidusax did have a god that was fled or like left, and he still awaited its return, or it awaited the god's return. Anyway, going forward again.
Order and goddess to wield the Elden Ring, not the first. And we learn from Ronnie that Empyrean...
Sorry, I think I skipped ahead ever so slightly too much.
...of how the Golden Order and Tomb of the Three Fingers was built for, but it's a good example of how the Golden Order and Marika are just the latest order and goddess to wield the Elden Ring, not the first. And we learn from Ronnie that Empyreans, candidates to become gods, each have their own Two Fingers who have chosen them. I think...
Alright, more lore than there seems. You've triggered my trap card. So yeah, this is one common criticism that gets levied at me for talking about the whole hearsay stuff, which I totally respect. However, recently, within like the past 2 weeks, was it? Yeah, I think it was last Monday, I made a stream where I talked about a compilation of instances of hearsay and other ways that FromSoft kind of betrays a player's expectations on a Miro board. So this Miro board is public if you guys like want to look at it yourself, but if you don't want to like look at it without more context, I did go into quite a lot of depth with like a 4.5 hour stream or whatever it was, talking about all these kind of different instances of hearsay, which I think were a bit more relevant beyond a rhetorical context. So with that being said, I do like bring up Placidusax and Godfrey being referred to as like the first Elden Lord. So even though I said I was going to avoid it, you roped me back in just when I thought I was getting out. So anyway, yeah, but like I said, I do understand why people feel that way. And for the most part, I do think that is kind of true, where that kind of hearsay in language is used more rhetorically than not.
I think it makes sense then that the Three Fingers were the fingers for an Empyrean who became a god, and upon their demise the Three Fingers were buried with them. So if the Three Fingers were an envoy of the greater will cast aside upon the demise of their god, whose message are they conveying through the imprinted stone tablets? I don't think the Three Fingers convey messages from the greater will, at least anymore. As I will show in a moment, the message of the Three Fingers is that the Greater Will made a mistake. Given that the Three Fingers is readerless and were entombed with an ancient god, I would argue that perhaps the Three Fingers were cast aside by the Greater Will. At this point, we've seen the stated information about the history of the Three Fingers, but some questions linger that I'd like to briefly address and use the information and context we have to attempt to answer them. The big one is, why does the Three Fingers have three fingers? The Three Fingers could be a malformed version of the Two Fingers twisted by the Flame of Frenzy. Conversely, the Three Fingers could be an indication of a separation of the hand of the Greater Will as a whole over the ages, assuming Outer God's envoys would have a human number of digits. I tend to think that, given the message of the Flame of Frenzy that the Three Fingers conveys, that it was a unique aspect of the Greater Will's envoys resulting from the great separation of creation. Regardless, it seems clear to me from what we've seen that being described as readerless, that it functions to convey a message, and that it speaks about the Greater Will, that it is kin to the Two Fingers and comes from the Greater Will, and that through its creation or an incident with its former god, perhaps the incident that led to it being called the Burned Fingers, it came to convey a message of undoing the creation of its master. I've seen it argued that...
So I think that's a pretty good summary of events there. Sasquatch says, doesn't Placidus Axe have gold in its flesh? Also, the ancient dragon smithing stone is his scale, which is made of gold. How do you explain that if he's unconnected to the Elden Ring? That's a good question. To be fair, I don't necessarily think that Placidus Axe is unrelated to the Elden Ring. Of course, there might be the possibility that gold was already native to the lands between, and then the Elden Ring came in later. But that just really depends on your interpretation of the timeline of events. It's open to interpretation. I don't think most players would read things that way, but that's not too important. Even if Placidus Axe wasn't Elden Lord, I still think that he may have been analogous to Elden Lord in an age before Elden Lords existed specifically. Unfortunately, we don't exactly know what the Elden Lord really does when the god seems to be the vessel for the vision. With the way that things are going now, it seems like the Elden Lords kind of impress on the god what that vision should be, which is kind of weird. So there might be the possibility the reason Placidus Axe isn't an Elden Lord is because it didn't have a vision to impress upon all creation. It might not have really brandished the power of the Elden Ring specifically, because it was so damn powerful, what need would it even really have of the Elden Ring? Perhaps. But again, that is just heavy speculation on my part here, but that's a good question. And more lore says, red is the tint of the primordial gold. Red lightning is therefore lightning of primordial gold, while yellow lightning is simply normal gold. So one interesting thing to consider about that aspect of gold is that Placidus Axe's ruin produces golden flames that aren't, like red gold or whatnot, or red flames. And it doesn't scale with arcane like most of the other Dragon Communion incantations. So it might have a purer form of gold in it than many of the other dragons, perhaps. With that being said, it obviously still does use red tinged gold and can even turn into a cloud of red tinged gold. Oops. Sorry, that was on my end because I punched my computer.
That the Flame of Frenzy itself is an outer god, and that the Three Fingers convey its message. This is reinforced by the fact that Miquella's Needle, which suppresses the meddling of outer gods, can remove the Flame of Frenzy, implying that Frenzy is from an outer god, the flame itself being a potential candidate. However, I would argue that as a former envoy of the Greater Will, the Three Fingers is still an alien presence meddling in the lands between.
I also like that idea there, and something Luigi said earlier, or not Luigi, my apologies, the lore hunter said earlier of it being abandoned by the greater will is also fun to think about within this context. So, yeah, okay, I'll just leave the other stuff alone.
As for the Flame of Frenzy, I think through this video it will be evident that the Frenzied Flame is a tool used to accomplish the goals of the Three Fingers, with the Lord of Frenzied Flame as its vessel. The Flame of Frenzy, the yellow Chaos Flame, is a means to return everything to the One Great. If Hyetta becomes a Finger Maiden of the Three Fingers, she is able to divine the message of the Three Fingers, which says,
I'm sorry, but I just never really expected the twinned armor set used with the Lord of Frenzied Flame. Like, it's oddly fitting in a way, just, and also like the contrast of like being such a Golden Order emblematic thing versus this is just, I don't know, it just struck me.
All that there is came from the One Great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again.
All right, looks like speak of the devil and he shall come. Hey, welcome back to the chat, MadLuigi. Yeah, we finished watching your videos way earlier, so if you want to revisit them, you're more than welcome to do so. And if you just want to hang out, you're also more than welcome to stick around.
it is the position of the Three Fingers that life was not worth the pain it brought, and that everything that came from the One Great must be melted by the Flame of Frenzy and made one again. My friend Ratatosker has made a very cool and unique video about the philosophy of the Frenzied Flame, using Russian literature that explores this nihilistic viewpoint and what brings someone to this philosophy. You can
Looks like we have another Ratatosker video to add to the list then, maybe?
find it linked below. So as we know, the Three Fingers imprinted their message on stone tablets, and it is from these tablets that Frenzy would first sprout according to the fingerprint stone shield. How did this happen? How did the message of the Three Fingers leave this tomb and afflict the lands between? The answer lies with a demon from Jewish mythology. Kind of. You'll see. Creary is the demon of blindness in Jewish lore. He rests on uncovered waters and blinds anyone who drinks it. Creary is also the name of the single most important person in the history of the Frenzied Flame. The Howl of Creary incantation tells us this. It is said that the sickness of the Flame of Frenzy began with Creary, the most reviled man in all history. Creary is accused of bringing the sickness of the Flame of Frenzy to the lands between, and being reviled for this implies that he did this intentionally and maliciously. Combine this information with the fact that the imprinted stones of the Three Fingers are said to be the very seeds from which Frenzy first sprouted, and I think it is very possible that Creary discovered the tablets of the Three Fingers and spread their message to the lands between, which would result in igniting the Flame of Frenzy. But it might be even more sinister than that. We meet the mythological Creary in Yura's body on the mountaintop of the Giants, where Creary explains that Yura gave him flesh, and now he is using it as a vessel. Ignoring how voluntary Yura's offering may have been, if we attack Creary, he tells us,
Oh my god. The audio balance there, that just like got in my ears.
Is chaos incarnate. I cannot die.
Creary is chaos in human form. Now, that could be some flowery language employed during battle, but I don't think it is. Creary is otherwise pretty blunt, even if he is not telling the whole story. The fact that he can inhabit others' bodies lends credence to him being unable to die, and he tells us he is able to do this because he is chaos incarnate. It may be that Creary was a product of the Three Fingers from the start, using the imprinted tablets of the three fingers to manifest in a vessel who discovered them, totally willingly of course, or Shabriri was a man who discovered the tablets and through his actions became Chaos Incarnate. Regardless of if Shabriri became Chaos Incarnate or if he always was, Shabriri's woes tells us what he did in the lands between. It is said that the man, named Shabriri, had his eyes gouged out as a punishment for the crime of slander, and with time, the blight of the Flame of Frenzy came to dwell in the empty sockets.
Is it slander? Maybe I'm just thinking of the Japanese, but I thought it was blasphemy specifically. Let me double check. All right. Zangen. I don't exactly know what that means. I'm going to look at the native dictionary real quick. Because sometimes, like, the quick stuff doesn't really give you the full picture. No, I guess it is just kind of like slander. It doesn't necessarily mean blasphemy. Oh, I think I know why. Because of the crime of slander, whereas I kind of looked at it as like this slanderous sin. No, I guess it is just... It isn't sin. Okay, never mind. I was just misremembering, I suppose. Alright, sorry for the derailment there.
Shabriri went out and did some slander, ultimately resulting in getting his or his vessel's eyes gouged out. You would think with the message of the three fingers his crime would be blasphemy for speaking out against the greater will and the mistake of the fractures of creation, but it's not the case. He made false statements and ruined the reputation of someone, or perhaps some people, and was punished. But how could slander result in the spreading of the Flame of Frenzy into the world? To quote again the nomadic merchant set, these merchants once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being accused of heretical beliefs, their clan was rounded up and buried alive far underground. Then, they chanted a curse of despair and summoned the Flame of Frenzy. I believe that Shabriri slandered the Great Caravan, accusing them of heretical beliefs in the Three Fingers. In other words, he accused them of holding his heretical beliefs. And the Golden Order, notoriously intolerant to those who did not fit into the Order, would of course deal harshly with people who supposedly held heretical beliefs.
So that's a really interesting theory that I haven't considered from that angle. I like it. I mean, obviously there's a lot of wiggle room where other interpretations could probably coexist with this or, like, you know, contrast it. But I think so far it's pretty good. So more lore says you gotta love the 1.0 Chinese translations because we get the man named Shabriri was born without pupils, known to be a great lover of the grape. So pupils is probably just eyes because that's a common thing that I see with like Japanese, like hitomi, which can mean like eye, also literally means pupil, which is always a delight trying to figure out if the source material is trying to say pupil or eye. And you'd think that'd be, you know, pretty self-evident, but you'd be surprised sometimes. The Life Rune Curse. Eamon doesn't think that Shabriri was always evil or malicious. If the Flame of Frenzy started with him and the Flame of Frenzy symptoms are maddening pain and unstoppable tears, he was probably wrong somehow. And if he spoke blasphemy but rightly against the gods and the greater will, blah blah blah, and had his eyes gouged out, that could bring him to utter despair. So yeah, him lacking the eyes is interesting because we do have the guilty who get their eyes gouged out as well, sort of by their thorns. I don't necessarily think the nomadic caravan is supposed to relate into like the thorns of the guilty and the briars and whatnot, the briars of sin, whatever it's called. So yeah, I have some thoughts about this, but I guess I'll wait to share them just because they're not like really fully complete thoughts. So I'm just kind of curious to hear the rest of the lore hunter's take right here. Shabriri might not have been a real person. He could be an ancient spirit possessing bodies throughout time. He could be an avatar of Frenzy itself. Maybe. Yeah, I'll just wait to talk about that.
And the nomadic merchants were an easy target, Being nomadic, people were likely to know about them, but not know them well beyond trading with them, and being outsiders made it easy to other them and accept slander spoken about them. Using the name Creary to reference a Jewish mythological demon reinforces similarities between the slander and prejudice faced by the nomadic merchants, and that faced historically by Jewish people. Referencing a demon of blindness, of course, plays in the effects of frenzy, but the parallels of the nomadic merchants and Jewish people also similarly frame Creary as their enemy, a mythological evil to the merchants, and by extension, the flame of frenzy. This goes a...
Okay, I think that parallel there also strengthens his claim. I mean, I was a lot less on board with it before, but that's a pretty nice thing to bring in. I'm not fully on board because I'm, just a skeptical guy, but yeah, this definitely falls into the realm of acceptable headcanon to me.
A decent way towards answering the question of whether or not the nomadic merchants did worship the Three Fingers. Perhaps some individuals did, but as a whole, no. As we've discussed, Creary's crime was slander, in this case lying about them having heretical beliefs. To further reinforce this, here is some cut dialogue from the nomadic merchant Kale in a version of the game in which Kale was in search of the Great Caravan and their fate. Did you...
Alright, I'm glad he brought this up because I was thinking about bringing up the cut dialogue a moment ago, so I'm also glad that I waited.
See what they did to my ancestors? The whole clan, buried alive, sick, maddened, husk of themselves. Have you heard their moans? They're hardly human anymore. They think we worship the Three Fingers? That we called the maddening sickness down upon them? Well, if that's what they expect from us, that's what they shall get from us. The world of grace and its people should have been content to see a sink between the cracks. Using cut content is risky because it might not represent the final story, but in talking with other lore folks and comparing his dialogue with the final game, Kale's words don't contradict anything in the game, and this dialogue provides the perspective of one of the nomadic merchants. And what we see here with Kale is that he clearly does not worship the Three Fingers and doesn't believe his ancestors did either. Additionally, we see the tragedy here through Kale that, in committing these grievous acts against the nomadic merchants, the Golden Order ironically perpetuated the very thing they were trying to prevent. The Great Caravan, buried alive by the Golden Order, chanted a curse of despair in the depths of the tomb, and their collective pain was so great that it summoned the flame of frenzy, just like Creary wanted. His slander would become apparent eventually, but it was too late for the Great Caravan. His eyes were gouged out for his crime, and with time, the blight of the flame of frenzy came to dwell in the empty sockets. Chaos incarnate brought frenzy into the world by showcasing on a grand scale how the pain and sorrow of life outweighed the pleasure of living, and how life itself is suffering. The Golden Order punished Creary for his lies, but what good did his punishment bring those who suffered? What peace did those wronged experience? Creary set out to prove his philosophy, and the Golden Order unwittingly obliged. And there we have it, the tragedy of the nomadic merchants and the history of the Flame of Frenzy. The Great Caravan was made into kindling for the frenzied flame, and leveraging the intolerance of the Golden Order, Creary managed to bring the Flame of Frenzy to life. To this day, the ancestors of the Great Caravan carry a heavy burden, afflicted by the sickness of frenzy by the prejudice they experienced to this day in the lands between. Yet, travel to the frenzied villages and you will find no merchants there. In fact, a note written by the merchants states that the village is inhabited by the sick and to stay well away. And if you should travel to the frenzy village near the lift of Dectus, you will find another note that talks about the Lord of the Frenzied Flame. Beneath Lanedale at the very bottom lies our Lord, Lord of the Frenzied, the Three Fingers who holds us in thrall. Their Lord, the Three Fingers, who rules over them not by choice, but who holds them in thrall ever since the Golden Order ignorantly sacrificed their tribe to the Flame of Frenzy, lighting their eyes with despair. From really went hard on the history of the dudes who sell me cookbooks and arrows. Goddamn. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the lore of Elden Ring, please like this video. And if you want more, check out my channel and subscribe to The Lore Hunter. Thanks for watching.
All right, so I think that was a really good video. There's a couple of parts that I want to touch on. I was trying to find the corresponding text in like the big text dump, but I don't remember what exactly I'm searching for. I mean, I know what I'm looking for. I just don't remember the exact thing to pinpoint it super quickly. But as far as the cut content goes, I do think there's some other things that we might need to consider in relation to the nomadic merchants not necessarily worshipping the three fingers. So I don't necessarily think this like contradicts the lore hunter's claims here that the merchants might not have wanted to initially revere the three fingers, but it might also be possible that the three fingers and the the frenzied flame itself was conjured out of their despair. So one reason why I say that is because when you go to the frenzied flame tower on the eastern side of Liurnia, you've got a bunch of commoners like gripping their heads and like the frenzied rats underneath the Eye of Sauron. But when you kill them, the Eye of Sauron kind of disappears. And I think part of the reason it was manifested there is because it was being manifested from their despair. And I do think there's a stronger theme of that, of despair manifesting things like the three fingers and Estelle, like in the Yellow Annex tunnel, because there is a strong possibility of Estelle in the Eternal Cities potentially coming from the Eternal Darkness spell, which is supposed to be a manifestation of despair, of the Nox despair specifically. And so if despair can summon in the three fingers according to the nomadic merchant's chapeau, as well as despair manifesting Estelle in the Eternal Cities, then why wouldn't we have despair being able to be manifested both in the Yellow Annex tunnel in the form of frenzied flame and or the Estelle that comes to exist there? Of course, all of that is some very contentious stuff right there, and I do want to continue looking for the quote that I'm thinking of in the content, but I'll get to chat first and then go back to that. Bella always wondered about the significance of the yellow ruins in the consecrated snowfield. Seems somewhat out of place, but there's probably a 500 IQ reason. Maybe. And that could tie into what I was saying. We just don't have direct answers, unfortunately. More lore says, the sickness of the frenzied flame began with Shabriri. The merchants were accused of heretical beliefs, then were buried, then summoned the flame. Shabriri had his eyes gouged out for slander. Frenzy then dwelled. So, yeah. It is questionable whether or not the merchants created that and whether or not that coincides with Shabriri. I do think it's a very strong possibility there. The slander angle, I think, is really interesting to consider in relation to all of this, because Shabriri could have slandered them and gotten them all locked down way underground, and then that's when they came into contact with the three fingers. It is interesting to me that it calls essentially the three fingers an ancient god, although it could be potentially read as it was the tomb of an ancient god that wasn't necessarily the three fingers, which just kind of feels a little bit dissatisfying to me, so I don't really think that's what they were going for. But anyway. Shabriri selling snake oil while Halant is more of a car salesman? Wait, what made you say that? Okay, you also find it interesting that the Frenzied Flame's beliefs is basically the same as King Galant's beliefs. Okay, yeah, okay, so you mentioned the Estelle stuff just as I did. Okay. Sweet. So we're on the same page with that. Right, so I'm just going to bring this over here while I kind of like look so that way you guys can look with me. Sorry if it's a little bit small. Oh no, did I lose my spot? Looks like I did. Alright, so how does this look for you guys? It's a little bit small, but it's no worse than chat. Okay. I'm going to look for Dear Customer, because I know it's like one of these things. So in cut content, I may as well talk about it some of these merchants were talking about how they were all kind of like metaphysically connected, and that one of their brothers was trying to make them all get merged or something like that, or that one of the brothers served the frenzied flame, and that could have been a reference to Creary, although I just don't remember where they say that or exactly how they say it. And I know like all of the merchants kind of get tied together. And for what it's worth, some of the nomadic merchants do actually use Frenzied Flame incantations when you attack them. So the one next to the Finger Reader Crone in Altus Plateau, next to that broken bridge by the Mirage Tower, he definitely uses Frenzied Flame incantations, as well as the Spirit Ashes, because they're described as being sick. Or maybe that was a Dream Mist thing that I might be misremembering. So that cryptogram might have been meant for Kale, for him to go to Leyndell and down there. The letter that the Lore Hunter had mentioned. So if anybody in chat or knows the quote that I'm looking for, it is very like clearly like cut content. Let me know. I mean, it's not a note, but the text. Sasquatch says, maybe Creary was the first to see the prophecy of the Erdtree burning, and that was the heretical belief or slander. Maybe. I don't necessarily think that aligns with like the Frenzied Flame specifically, but I do think that the prophecy of flame within the Erdtree is because of like sealing the flame of ruin, and that fire is necessary for rebirth and continuing the cycle of the Erdtree naturally. You always found it hilarious that Creary has such a good sales pitch in the mountaintops, but he just couldn't keep it together for 2 minutes. He just couldn't, and that's the funniest thing. Hi, Bobby. Eamon says the merchants have several associations with many colors and a full hand on their instrument's bow, so they probably worshipped an older, more crucible-connected / pagan faith. Oh yeah, that's the other good thing to bring up. So if you want to believe in the one great being like a full hand, the little like hands on their instruments could explain why they would have been more on board with the 3 fingers and like wanting to be one like organism, one being, because that was more of a thing in the earlier development, and they definitely cut it, and we don't know why. I know they wanted to like make the merchants patrol a lot more, but they just didn't have enough time to make it work, apparently. No, that's not it. So there is some remnants of that kind of earlier cut content with one of Kale's like last lines, that if anyone harms the merchants, they will all show that person no mercy, because that's just the way that they are, deeply unforgiving. Obviously, if you attack one merchant, the other merchants don't know about it in the retail build of the game, but I feel like this is kind of a reference to what they had planned earlier, where if you attacked one merchant, they would all get pissed off at you and attack you on sight, which would have been super cool. So he talks about Blythe here. He's trying to find the Great Caravan because he doesn't know about what happened. And obviously there is still a bit of a contradiction in the lore, in that it says the entirety of the clan got buried underground. So maybe some escaped, because certainly not every single merchant is underground by virtue of us being able to run into a couple of them on our travels. The whole clan buried alive? Not you, apparently. So that was the quote that he used. There's something else, though. And so, just to give some more context about this stuff, like, the madness of these dudes was quelled by their lullaby, Maybe I should look up Lullaby. That might help. Okay, yeah. That might do it. No. Song? Music? Sort of. Instrument? I'm really struggling. Oh, this one isn't going to work. I don't think. Tune? I don't know. Oh, that's going to be tuner. Man. Maybe divide. I would type in 1, but I know that's definitely not going to help. Okay. I'm just going to go with Dear Customer again and like work there. Maybe I just need to like look up Creary or something. This should all be Kale's stuff. Is there anything above it? Not exactly. So we get a heal, heal. Sorry, I can't find this for you guys. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes. Yeah, now they're all just kind of screaming. I'm going to look up Frenzied real quick, or Friends. Oh, that's a lot of results. Oh, that's because of like the flavor text here. Not like flavor text, but... What was that right there? I don't know. Definitely not what I'm looking for. Okay. So, yeah, I guess I might as well talk about this, that the merchant set says, the merchants chanted a curse of despair and summoned the flame of frenzy. So there is that kind of direct connection between the frenzied flame and despair specifically, which we're talking about. And that's the direct quote. Oh, no, that's Melina. Still Melina. Melina. Creary. Does he say anything up here that was cut? No, that's your... well, they're all the same character, technically, sort of. Bike. That ghost. Okay, looks like I'm just failing completely there. I'll probably have to like look for it and then maybe post it to the Discord later. Every sword is a back scratcher. Melody? Oh man, that might have worked. I'll look up Melody, and if I don't find it, then I'm just gonna quit. No, I hear Festive Melody, so that's them getting skinned. But that was a good guess. All right, I'll need to find it. All right, so anyway, we have watched all of our allotted videos for tonight. I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm not sure what we'll do tomorrow. Maybe a bunch of these Ember ones. And maybe Quaylog to round it out. If you guys do have more suggestions for videos for me to react to, feel free to let me know in the actual videos comment sections, because chat doesn't accept them apparently. And if not there, feel free to join the Discord and link them to me there, and I will add them to the list. So once again, thank you all for joining in, leaving your comments. Even if they're like challenging me, I welcome that. It's fun to bounce off of each other. And help me out with the YouTube algorithm. Make sure you like the video, click the beckoning bell, all the silly gamer terms. Anyway, that'll be it for tonight. We will be going live again at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So till then, stay safe, take care. Last Protagonist out.